Hello, everyone.
In the UK, showing kind of VR's path to mainstream, that it's being included in things like that. We will talk about Apple announcing the date for WWDC 2025. And the reason that's important is because that's where it's expected to unveil visionOS 3 for Vision Pro, so the third major version of that operating system. We'll then briefly discuss China's Vivo revealing Vivo Vision, which looks like a blatant clone of Apple Vision Pro with a few small tweaks. Let me copy your homework style. We'll then talk about Bigscreen Beyond 2 being off to a very good start. It's selling significantly faster than Beyond 1, and Bigscreen has some specific comparisons there we can talk about, and we will discuss the implications that might have for high-end PC VR. We will then talk about Pico 4 Ultra's latest operating system version. We often discuss the Quest updates, but we're going to talk about Pico for a little bit. So they've added some really interesting features. Firstly, they've added free window positioning, which everyone else has, but they now finally have it fully. 3D screen recording, which is a unique feature. 3D photo conversion, so 2D to 3D photos. That's something that's on visionOS from visionOS 2. Improved hand tracking and improved body tracking via those trackers you strap to your legs. So Pico pushing forward there with their Quest 3 competitor. We'll then discuss two upcoming Quest Horizon OS features. So one of them is in the current PTC, the public test channel version.
I think we've got Holodeck in the middle there, and then we'll do that.
Yes, you're right. My notes, I haven't updated them. So before that, we will discuss Ian's article. He's been referencing it for 2 weeks. He's finally got it out on UploadVR.com, so he's going to discuss it. He went to the Austin, Texas Holodeck that sells real estate, a walkable scale VR holodeck. Then we will indeed move on to talk about those two upcoming Quest Horizon OS features. V76 PTC lets you use your Meta avatar as a virtual webcam in video calling apps. So not this old Meta avatar, but your new Meta avatar. And then we'll talk about some data mining from Luna that suggests that you will soon be able to screen share 2D windows in your home environment. And that's obviously something you can do in visionOS as a pillar feature. Finally, we will have a Valve section, 2 stories, one about Valve's past and I guess present, and the other about the future. The first is my editorial about Valve's lack of investment in VR gaming, which was prompted by the 5-year anniversary of Half-Life Alyx. And this will be an interesting one because Ian strongly disagrees with that. And so you'll get a little bit of kind of back and forth there, I'm sure, between us. Finally, we will talk about the Steam VR data mining that reveals that a Valve Deckard proof of concept had 2K LCD panels and a Snapdragon mobile chip, kind of like a Quest 3 with a slightly faster chip and eye tracking. And I want to stress, long before we get into that discussion, the word A, one of the proof of concepts. We will talk about what that may mean, but we will also be very careful to say that that does not reflect what will actually be in the final shipping Valve Deckard headset.
Yeah, I'm seeing Devin Bigelow out there, VR Gamer Dude, in our comments check. Let's see, we had a lot of people tuning in. F Meister, let's see, Onakazi, Psycho, Arlen, of course. Thank you for tuning in, Arlen. Looking forward to seeing your comments. We had a fun discussion over on Gamescast. We'll continue that over on Tuesday. I've also been talking about the holodeck over there. You can't stop me, David, over there. Poor Dawn has had to listen to me over there talk about it too. So I'm excited to get into that later in this show. And I appreciated David's advice on what we should put in the thumbnail here, with the little question mark and exclamation mark over the Valve Deckard LCD idea. That's going to be a big discussion when we get into it as we assess that. I see Henry Stockdale as we speak over on UploadVR.com preparing news to go check out over there. So if we see that pop up in the comments, we are on the case there. And just want to say thank you to Henry as we get into this list for all the incredible work he's doing out there covering our news. Please become a member to support our work over at UploadVR.com. Yeah, it means an enormous amount to us. So this first one, David, we want to get right into it with the VR headset prices now being used as a metric for measuring inflation in the UK.
Sure, yeah, and I also just want to echo that, yeah, Henry and Don are doing a great job at prepping and getting out some GDC coverage, and there's more to come. So there'll be some great games coverage on UploadVR.com. let's talk about this because we love to chart VR's path to the mainstream. And for some people, mainstream is a Boolean, right? It's one day VR is not mainstream and then it's mainstream. But I think a better way to talk about this is that it's a path to mainstream. And just like where does blue end and green begin on a blue to green color scale, there's no one moment. There are moments that matter, but it's all about it being step by step. And I'd argue that, as Meta has kind of claimed, Quest 2 was the first VR headset you could describe as mainstream, but that doesn't mean it's as mainstream as a mobile phone, but it does mean it is as mainstream as like an Xbox console, right? And so this story is interesting because the UK's Office of National Statistics now uses the prices of VR headsets as one of its data points for calculating inflation. So it uses the price of hundreds of goods, and these are meant to reflect what everyday UK people are buying because that's what they need to be checking, right? So they said that including VR headsets shows how consumer spending has evolved over the years. And this is not considered just like something that an average person would buy. And so they're tracking it for charting inflation. So very interesting stuff. I don't think there's much to say about this other than, I guess, PlayStation VR 2 coming down in price may kind of trip things up a little bit in their inflation calculation, and kind of Quest 3S being cheaper than Quest 3, I guess, if they're charting it by like how many people buy these things, or maybe they're just indexing it by price. VR headsets of the kind that are actually selling in the UK at scale aren't actually going up in price. So I wonder if that's kind of also balancing out, but that's for the economists to discuss, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think politics is going to be an area we're also going to discuss. I think it's interesting to note that like this is a government trying to include VR in its understanding of how its people are doing. I noticed I actually sent an email to a U.S. Representative last night trying to learn more about a bill that's been proposed for the United States to bring attention to immersive technologies. And that would be a long path ahead for the bill. But it was interesting to read even the draft language of this bill, which made an effort to define mixed reality, virtual reality, and augmented reality, and like to see that attempted to be put into law in the United States. Whether or not it succeeds is still interesting. So I was investigating that last night, and I know it's a bit of a stretch, but it's also the same general idea that maybe governments are waking up to the idea that they actually need to be charting out the impact of VR headsets in the very near future.
Yeah, I love that you said attempt to define, because that's something that not even the industry can agree on. So you got to wonder that if these kind of like government bodies are going to the industry and asking, they get 5 different answers from 4 different people, right? So you might imagine this is going to be something that's kind of difficult. But as this becomes something that's more normal, it'll kind of become apparent over time. And yeah, again, I don't think we have. Sorry.
Well, sorry, you got me going. There's a line in the bill that I read that said that virtual reality was invented in the United States.
Ooh, I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone would hugely disagree with that, but we could go into the history there, but I don't think anyone would disagree with that. If you look at kind of the early approaches of VR, yeah.
Well, all right. So I just mentioned that is now like that's the play. This is the place of political. This is a political playground in the coming years that we're going to be watching. And apparently, the inflation. Now we're going to measure inflation, including VR headsets in our calculation. So, yeah, I'm sorry I caught you off guard there with that question, David. But yeah, it was a eye-catching line to see in a proposed bill whether or not it succeeds. All right, we're going to talk about Apple's WWDC 2025 dates. I would like you to get invited to this, David. Have you been invited to this?
I don't know that anyone's been invited to this yet. I think this is a mainly online event where they have a very small in-person section for developers to try things hands-on. I guess that brings us on to what do we expect in visionOS 3. We don't really know, but one of the things we do expect is PlayStation VR 2 controllers, the Sense controllers from PlayStation VR 2, to be supported by Apple Vision Pro. That's something we do expect to happen in visionOS 3, or maybe an update just before or after. And that would maybe be something Apple would be doing hands-on with Sony, where they're demonstrating that, at Apple Park. But it also isn't necessarily, right, because they can easily just roll that up as a firmware update to people that, I have PlayStation VR 2 controllers and I could do that at home. So we'll have to see what Apple has planned there. I don't think anyone's expecting new hardware from Apple specifically. We're not expecting a new headset. It would be a shock because there has been no rumor whatsoever of a new headset coming at this WWDC.
Yeah, well, the people remember the Vision Pro. Who was doing the leaking of Vision Pro stuff before the Vision Pro arrived? And I think it was jilted former employees by and large. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Sure. So Bloomberg's Mark Gurman is the source for a lot of this, including this idea that these PlayStation VR 2 controllers have been are planned to be supported. And he also revealed a lot of the details of Vision Pro before Apple had even acknowledged the project to exist. And sure, some people have speculated like jilted former employees, but a lot of those details were right about the stuff that would have had to been finalized very, very late. And also, if you look at some of Gurman's recent reporting about Apple, including, the reshuffle that just happened, where Tim Cook kind of lost faith in the AI chief and has moved things around, that was at a meeting where only like the top 100 people in Apple were at, and he had that minutes after the meeting. So Gurman clearly has a source who is considered to be in the top 100 of Apple's hierarchy right now. So I often wonder this too: how on earth does he get all of this information? I think unless he's bugged one of the Apple executives, one of them seems to just be giving him direct information live from inside Apple.
Yeah, I mean, you can expect there's a certain tier of like, we're going to report it anyway, so you might as well just tell me, right? Like, I get that. Like, there's that's part of what we do. I think at the end of the day, and we're reaching that sort of connection to some of our reporting areas, but like the vision, I still. Everyone, including Apple, knows what the Vision Pro is failing to do. And every month that they can't ship new hardware that takes the journey forward, they're ceding ground to the competition in the immersive space.
So I disagree, because I still think right now it's about visionOS. Like, we're talking about, what we expect to happen to Vision Pro. But I think right now what Apple cares about is visionOS, because when they do manage to come out with a headset that is affordable, lighter, while still retaining all the good things about Vision Pro, except, maybe eyesight, and you could argue whether that even is a good thing, it's going to run the same visionOS operating system. It's going to have all of the immersive content, all of the apps, all of the improvements that they're making. And at the end of the day, right, if it's not possible to deliver something like a Vision Pro for a lot cheaper yet, then there's nothing Apple can really do about that, right? Like, they can continue to invest in the supply chain. They can continue to, test new micro OLED panels and try and say, has somebody finally cracked making them much cheaper while still retaining high pixel density and high quality? And until that happens, they're just going to chug along. It will happen, right? Nobody disagrees that it's going to happen. So it's not like quantum physics here. Well, some of it is, right? But it's not like trying to invent a time machine or a teleporter. It's not, and it's also not like trying to invent wide field of view transparent AR. It's just getting the yields of a manufacturing process that is decently well understood up. And it is happening. It's just happening slowly. So I still think that's why, WWDC, the focus is going to be on visionOS. I suspect they say the word visionOS more than they say the phrase Apple Vision Pro. And that's still going to be the focus for Apple.
That makes sense. And that's kind of why I want you there. And so for the people that aren't aware, we got an invite to the announcement of the Apple Vision Pro. And it was a very, very memorable day in the office for UploadVR, and the office, of course, being in each of our homes globally, right? As I dropped the news on Slack that we had been personally invited to go to this event. And I don't want to travel much this year. I was surprised to go to Bigscreen Beyond. Was kind of surprised actually to go to the Austin Holodeck that we're talking about later, because I want stuff to come to me here in New York as much as possible, and I've got some limits on my travel this year. So I want David to go to these things, and I need David to make contact with some of the devs that would be out there. even if even if there was no hardware, you need to I need him to dive into this ecosystem as this operating system matures. Because, all right, I need to talk about my dream feature here. We've seen it in Gemini, alluded to. I've seen some of the research coming out of Google's research arm. They've done some brilliant things with Google's research arm for identifying objects and then giving you a list of things you can do with that object. I'm if Apple's going to release a similar set of features to that, the question is which visionOS version it actually launches in. And I would love to see it for a limited number of objects beyond the controller. So controller should be one set of objects that you just look at and you get a pop-up that says, would you like to play these 3 games that are installed on your Vision Pro with that device that's right there? But I want that for about 5 more devices.
Sure. So with Meta's Horizon OS and their Quest headsets now allowing direct pass-through camera access, and Android XR from Google confirming that they will have direct camera access at launch, there is a lot of pressure on Apple to do the same. Right now, they do for enterprise, if you're making an internal enterprise app for business, not on the App Store, but that's obviously not what we're talking about here. And I think rather than Apple trying to support every possible computer vision use case as a new API, they should just probably do what Google and Meta are doing and give developers access to run these computer vision models. Because then everything you just described a developer can do. You can run object tracking. Again, you're limited to the kind of compute that you have on these headsets. So you're not going to be talking about fast moving object. But if you're talking about, do you want to detect a gamepad? Sure. You do want to detect an object that isn't like the current 3D object tracking of Vision Pro, where it has to be the exact object. Like if you wanted to detect a type of object, that's something that developers are already working on with the Quest camera pass-through access. Like we see on social media and on developers kind of discords, people are having so much fun coming up with really cool use cases for this. And the Meta Horizon Store should probably allow it sometime in the next few weeks or months, and we'll start to see those come in apps. Let developers figure this out, give them the camera access. And that's what I really hope to see in visionOS 3.
I get it. I'm wondering if that flies in the face of the idea of performance. So I don't want my my operating system to look at an orange and ask me, do I want to use this orange as a baseball in VR? Like what I need is for 5 objects around me to be usable in my VR headset in the near term. I need my flight stick, my racing wheel, my controllers, my keyboard, my mouse. I need all of those. Even it's already a really smooth experience to connect a mouse to visionOS and have it control both visionOS and flow over to your Mac over there. It's really nice. But I want to see that extended out to all these other devices.
Sure. When it comes to gamepad control, I think what we have heard from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's reporting is that the PlayStation VR 2 Sense controllers won't just be supported in games, but actually in visionOS. So instead of using gaze and pinch, you'll be able to point and use the buttons and sticks on the Sense controllers, and I assume use them as laser pointers. So that's something that from the PSVR 2 controllers, Apple is working on. But I get you want to be able to do that with a gamepad. I'm sure that would be an interesting feature too. I mean, just before we move on from this, I want to say that the one thing I really want from visionOS 3 is the ability to have windows open in fully immersive apps, just like I can in Meta's Horizon OS. You love doing it. I think you're doing it right now. You can't. If we ported this studio to Apple Vision Pro, if you're playing Job Simulator or whatever you're playing, if it's not a Reality Kit shared space app, which comes with a bunch of different limitations, if it's a fully immersive app, even if it's a mixed reality app that you made in Unity using a bunch of custom features that can't be done in polyspatial, you can't bring up a window. I can't be watching Netflix while I'm in even in Gears and Goo, right? Even in playing a mixed reality game where it's taking place on my table, I can't have Netflix or YouTube up in Vision Pro, and I can in Quest, and that's crazy. That's my number one request for visionOS 3.
Yeah, so let's move on here to Bigscreen Beyond 2 here pretty quickly, and I'm enjoying the commentary. I was smiling here as I'm looking at the comments here. I'm not going to give you what you're asking for out there in the comments, but I will tease you even worse to talk about the word walkable. So I used the word walkable for my holodeck story that we're going to talk about later on, and I think it's a very important word to use related to VR. So walkable is the word. Okay, so yeah, I hope I messed with a couple of your bingo cards out there with that one. All right, David, let's talk about Big Screen Beyond 2.
I think you're missing a topic there. We're going to talk about Vivo Vision first from
Okay, I guess I had the
China.
wrong order. Sorry about that. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, you're
all
right.
good. So there's not much to say about this because we don't know any of the specifications, the price, the weight. We know before people ask any questions, we know two things about this headset. Three things, I should say. The name, the visual design, and the launch window. The name is Vivo Vision. The visual design is heavily, heavily similar to Apple Vision Pro, down to the exact style of the headband and the facial interface, to the battery and even its connector. And the only real departure it takes from a design perspective is that these arms are kind of metallic looking, though potentially still plastic, rather than Vision Pro's kind of bright white plastic. It also looks a little bit sleeker than Vision Pro. Sure, it looks like it's sleeker and lighter, but we don't even know if this is a functional prototype or just a mock-up, right? We haven't seen this demo. The last thing we know about this, the thing number 3, is that it's supposed to launch in mid-2025. And if you don't know what Vivo is, it's a Chinese smartphone company. They don't sell in the United States, as far as I'm aware. They mostly sell their smartphones in China, and they also do sell to other markets like India and Europe.
Yeah, so no shame is the commentary that I'm seeing out there that I should point out. And I realize what happened here in my notes here, David. So topics 2 and 3 here are Apple announcing the date for WWDC, and then subject number 3 is China's Vivo revealing Vivo Vision. And I didn't put a line between the two items in my notes. And so I skipped over it to Big Screen Beyond. And what's ridiculous is when I look at when I look at the two sentences next to each other, not even looking at how blatant this stupid thing is, I see the word Vision Pro and Vivo Vision next to each other. And I'm like, oh, that's all the same subject here. Oh, that was all Apple related. Even Vision Pro and Vivo Vision look visually. Oh my God. All right. Sorry. I thought you would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it is shameless. It truly is. This is par for the course for a lot of Chinese tech companies, though. A lot of Americans won't be aware of this because these devices aren't really sold in the United States for various reasons. But in Europe, it's quite common to see people like Huawei phones, Xiaomi phones, even occasionally, like a Vivo. And one thing you'll notice is that they have their own fork of Android, each of these companies, that is pretty much a game of who can be the closest to copy Apple as possible. It's like an iOS-ified version of Android. And every time Apple announces a new feature, be it like the dynamic island or whatever, you've got maybe 3 to 9 months until these OSs come out with a shameless copy. And I mean, it's shameless. It's not even inspired, right? It is a copy. And so, some people might take the argument, if you want to do devil's advocate here, that that you should be able to copy people and that's maximum competition and it's good for consumers because it forces everyone to be at their best. And other people are going to point out, as some commenters are, that it's kind of downright theft and that it doesn't encourage people to innovate, because why would you invest in actually doing the hard work to be 0 to 1 if someone else can just kind of copy? So yeah, everyone in the comments is going to have their own opinion on this, but I think we can all see what this is. And my big question for this is, will it run Google's Android XR or will it run Vivo's own Android fork that kind of does the, copy visionOS thing?
I'm looking at Jack's comment saying that they were buying bootlegs on markets in other countries during their time off, and they always love a good bootleg. I had a pair of Adidas for $15, the brand with 4 stripes. Yeah, Adidas. So I appreciate that comment. And are we ready to move on from the Vivo Vision, David, and talk about the Big Screen Beyond 2?
Sure. I think we just have. I want to bring up one. Devil's advocate. We always like to bring up. If people have opposing views. Chris is saying if we didn't copy, we'd be standing still. Copying is how we evolve. So I'm just reading that out as kind of like there are different opinions on this.
Yeah, I saw, what is it? There was what Darshan's comment as we move into the Big Screen Beyond 2 discussion, where he called patents dumb, I think is what he said on our stream in public in our comments last week. So go watch that episode. with Big Screen Beyond to hear us talking about. But we've got some updates here that David has been following on the sales front, and I've been following on the sales front too. And we really want to gauge sort of what the market uptake is of this headset as much as we can. We can't really expect Big Screen to do what Meta doesn't and release actual sales figures. That would be, we would love that, but like it's not something the competition does, so we can't really expect it of Big Screen to give us hard sales numbers, even though we'll report on that the moment they give it to us. But in lieu of that, we have markers like this to give. So what is our marker that we've got to report right now, David?
Yeah, so I don't think anyone actually releases specific sales figures. Sony did for the original PlayStation VR, but it hasn't for a very long time for PlayStation VR 2, and read that however you want. So the news here for Big Screen Beyond 2 is that in the first 24 hours, it sold more than Beyond 1 did in 6 months. I'm going to read that again just to be clear. First 24 hours of sales, greater than Beyond One's first 6 months. And it said, the startup told us that this represents 10 times as many Beyond 2 headsets as compared to Beyond One's launch day. So on launch day for Beyond 1, that was 10 times less than launch day for Beyond 2. And for another statistic here, they outsold Beyond 1's first day in just 25 minutes. So the first 25 minutes of Beyond 2 sales outsold Beyond 1's first day, and they outsold the first 2 months in just 4 hours. So new orders of Big Screen Beyond 2 and Beyond 2E will now ship in June compared to April and May for the first batches respectively. So they've got a large volume of orders and they are back ordered. But we do want to put this in context. So Big Screen Beyond 1 is here on the Steam hardware survey. I'm not 100% sure if this is the latest data. It may be a few months old, but you get the rough idea that it's at roughly 0.5% of Steam VR usage. So about 1 in 200 Steam VR users are using Big Screen Beyond. Again, this is 1 or 2 months outdated, but I wonder where we might see Beyond 2 pop up. Could it be somewhere around here within the end of the year?
Yeah. I like that we both ended up pointing to the same area over time. I initially thought up here when I was thinking about the big leap that they could do, but no, that would be too far for them to get this quickly. But if you do 10x, if you imagine 10x of this, you could get into this region here pretty quickly. But they have to ship headsets. Those headsets have to be retained and used, and that's what we're waiting to kind of see. That's a leap. So I've talked about this. I've heard this in the dev community, right? Imagine you have 10 users for your app, and then suddenly tomorrow you have 100 users for your app. And then on Friday, you've got 1,000 users for your app. And then on Saturday, you've got 10,000 users for your app. How do you scale? How do you scale your enterprise, your effort, everything you're doing for that kind of overnight growth is something that it's not overnight for most people. It's usually like a stair-step thing that takes a couple months, but it can be devastating, that kind of sudden change in the wind. And that's just for software, right? So I'm actually a little concerned for Big Screen suddenly having, I think I talked to them, they were less than 40 employees. And now they're crushed by an order number that's just extraordinary for this new headset that is adjustable for each eye in a very elegant way that we reported out last week.
Yeah, but I think that adjustment that you're saying will actually make it easier for their logistics, right? Because Big Screen Beyond 1 had to be made in 18 different sizes, 18 different IPD separations, and then you would get sent the one that matches your eyes based on your scan. And with this, they don't have to do that. They still have to custom mold the facial interface, at least for now, until they release the Halo strap later in the year. But this is one unit, right? There's 3 different colors, but that's not logistically difficult. That's something that any consumer electronics company can pull off relatively easily. The hardware, the electronics of this thing is the same for every customer, right? And that's going to make things logistically more easy. But again, where I thought you maybe were taking that argument was, if you have 10 users and you go to 100, you can say I've 10x'd my user base, but it's not that much. And I saw someone on X who's kind of like a prolific shit poster in fairness, but they were saying, oh, this startup's going to outsell Apple with their headset. And that's why we kind of want to contextualize this, because, I expected Bigscreen Beyond 1 over 2 years probably sold low tens of thousands. So, somewhere between 15 and 30,000. That's an estimate. Please don't quote me on that. I want to say that again. That is an estimate. And so even if this does get to like 10x, you're talking like 150,000 over 2 years or something like that, right? And even Apple Vision Pro, which some people are so important, really want to point out as, oh, it was a failure, and we can disagree on that, but that's like 500,000, right? So even the scale we're talking about here, even if it does do 10x over 2 years, you'd still be talking about like 4 or 5x less than Apple Vision Pro has done in 1 year. So that's not to kind of insult Bigscreen here, because this is a niche product. I just want it is a niche product, and that's fine. Not everything has to be mass market. It's good that this market is at the size where you can have small companies that are building, specifically targeted high-end niche hardware for enthusiasts, and that's what this is. And from your impressions, and those are only initial impressions, we don't have a review because this isn't in hands yet, that it seems like it is a great product for targeting those enthusiasts, but some people are getting a little bit carried away by kind of thinking that this is at anything near to even Apple scale, never mind Meta.
And thinking it's a silver bullet is also, a better than everything else in every way is going to be a mistake, I think, to take away. It's not, I didn't put that in my write-up, right? That's not those aren't my words. That's not how I assess this thing in just my limited hands-on time. I put flat out in our write-up, it's going to take us a while to provide a buying recommendation here. We're going to need to spend hours with the thing. I kind of want, I wished I could have spent hours with the thing during GDC, but I had to go talk to the holodeck guy during the same day. So that was essentially how my schedule panned out to try to make that happen. I saw a really wonderful comment from Casey Chiefs earlier on, and I wanted to highlight it. Honestly, I don't understand why the average person isn't further interested in VR. My girlfriend can't fall asleep with the TV on, and I can fall asleep in a movie theater in the same bed. I've experienced that. I've complained about it actually because my AirPods seem to disconnect as I'm starting to fall asleep inside the Apple Vision Pro home theater experience, which is like Tim Cook has walked over to you and shook you awake right as you're falling asleep. I would like that to not happen in the future on my experience. And I love that description because it's your use case. Like David and I, if you go back 5 years or something on the show, we have more than 200 episodes. But I remember you and I talking years and years ago now about the prospect of homes being rebuilt, like us reshaping all of our furniture around the presence of a VR headset. And here it is. It's actually happening. And lo and behold, like you actually don't use the headset as often as you would like unless you move around all your furniture to allow for its use more often. So I just wanted to highlight that comment as like you're absolutely right, and I think it's just educating people that is a real actual use case. You can remove the TV from the bedroom and suddenly repair a lot of angry, stressful, like there's people who are going to be fidgeting their legs for hours every night because the light on the TV over there bothers them. And they're just living with that, right? It's the same darning thing I talked about in the airport a couple weeks ago, where I went into an Apple Vision Pro while in the terminal and I tuned everyone out with the AirPods, and I felt bad about it, but I didn't feel too bad because everyone else in that terminal was tuning out horrible music from overhead that cut out for 2 seconds every 10 seconds. And it's like, that we forget how often we tune out bad audio experiences. Like it's already pretty commonplace that we do this.
Yeah, I think it is a super interesting question. And one of the things you say there, it is a matter of education in so many ways. The problem for VR has been for more than a decade now that you really can't market or sell it effectively on a flat screen. So you can show whatever kind of ad you want. You can even do the kind of third person mixed reality thing where you're showing the person in the experience. But until you actually put a headset on someone's head, it's difficult for them to understand what it actually is. And I've done this so many times in my life in the past 10 years, in the past 15 years. Someone who kind of is somewhat interested in the idea, or maybe not interested at all, kind of doesn't really get it, isn't really interested before the demo. And then you put the headset on their head, and after the demo, they are like, holy swear word, that is well beyond anything I ever expected it. And then those people sometimes go on to buy a headset, or 2 years or 3 years down the line, they go on to buy a headset. And I think that's one reason why the Apple Store approach, where Apple is now building its Apple stores with a whole Vision Pro demo section as a side room, right? That's its new store design for every new store from Apple. That's why that's so important. And it's why enthusiasts going out and giving people demos is so important. And it's why, we've argued that Meta really should actually be continuing with its retail strategy of getting people into headsets. Because right now, most people in the world have actually not even ever tried good VR, ever. Not even once. And even if you go to like the developed world, a lot of people still haven't. And then some people have tried maybe like an Oculus Go or a Gear VR 10 years ago. Or maybe they tried, someone's like PlayStation VR 1 on a roller coaster game like 5 years ago or something. Like they don't realize that these headsets can do these things. They don't realize that the resolution's gotten better. Most people don't even know that these headsets do mixed reality, right? The wait, I can actually see the real world out of this thing is a shock for most people putting on a Quest 3 or 3S. Like we're still very, very early, and these things just happen as they ripple over time. And that's why enthusiasts giving people demos is important. So I would recommend, if you are someone in our comments who owns a headset, as you very likely are, go and show your friends, like have a VR party night, invite people over for, drinks or not drinks, depending on whether you want to, and VR, and demo them some of the best content you've tried and just let them go through it. But don't do anything too intense. Give them something that's suitable for newcomers and puts the best foot of VR forward.
I mean, that's the beauty of Bigscreen Beyond 2 and the demo that we captured, that Don Hopper out there captured for our channel, is you see my raw first 3 minutes or so on our on our page of me putting this thing on. And I put on the Bigscreen Beyond 1, but I hadn't used the new mechanism for doing this yet, for readjusting the positioning of the lenses. And I had Darshan come over and help me do it while I was in VR. But there was this remarkable moment captured on film on our channel that is 100% real, right? Like I assembled the VR headset right in front of me as if it was like a gun. Like I hate using that, but like imagine a carburetor, like an engine tool. Like it felt like an object that I want, a tool that I want to use to do something for hours with. Like, and that's like, I hate to say like a gun is like that, but you go out to a shooting range for hours and enjoy that experience like that. And you do it, you assemble it, you clean it, you put it back away. Like it's a similar mode to what it feels like to assemble this thing and go into VR. And it's fast, right? You're watching me do it. And you can imagine the switching of experience of showing someone else VR, right? It's actually really kind of beautiful to imagine putting it in someone else's hands and showing them where the adjustment is, right? They're real, like it's a tactile thing that proves how small VR is as a device. Like everyone else showed me that it was a big face brick you put on your face. You're showing me that you actually lose the pass through and it is almost the size of glasses. Like you are so good, David, about pointing out the way that VR headsets aren't like glasses, and the things that we show on our stream aren't glasses, but the ones that recess out a couple inches from the face and they trick you in the marketing images to make it look like glasses. Like this is so darn close. And Darshan, Bigscreen, they know it's not glasses. They're reluctant to use that word, but darn it, we see it. We see that it's within reach with this entire tech stack, and it's beautiful to think you can share that with other people now with a Bigscreen Beyond 2.
Yeah, it's existence proof of the possibility for these headsets to get a lot smaller. And it's going to take a long, long time for standalone to get there. But if you have demoed a Quest 2 or 3 to someone and their complaint is that it is still too big and heavy and bulky, then imagine showing them this demo and saying, you can imagine, standalone is going to get there. Or if they're a PC gamer, you don't even have to ask them to imagine that. You can say, you just plug this in to your gaming PC. So that's super interesting. So I see some comments here kind of discussing the tracking base stations. So to be clear, this does use Steam VR tracking, meaning you need to buy base stations from Valve or HTC, one at minimum, two or more ideally. If you have the money and you want the best, you'll have four, right? One in each corner of your room to minimize any occlusion issues. And there's discussion here about like, there are some rumors that Valve have stopped producing base stations, that HTC is doing this. It's unclear whether those rumors are like accurate or not, but to be clear, like you can still buy them from Valve, right? As a consumer, whatever's happening behind the scenes, whether whoever's making them, you can go to Steam and you can buy base stations from Steam right now, and you can buy them from HTC as well if you want.
So, David, explain something about how tracking works to me, okay? Imagine a Steam VR tracking 3.0, and it instead of Lighthouse base stations, it incorporates the ability to put QR codes in various portions of the wall and track your headset relative to the position of those QR codes with a head-mounted webcam. Right? This is I'm going full circle with a very old idea to bring back forward a very new idea of just how do we give your head 6 DOF tracking with very little headset weight and have it be pretty robust in various scenarios. You could do it with a webcam, and you could do some nice things with that, but does it work in the dark? Does it work in the bed like we just described the person KC Chiefs earlier saying, they want to sit right next to their partner and watch in bed, a home theater. Steam Deck in bed on the ceiling is going to be a killer use case for whatever Valve's headset ends up being. But I wonder about this. That was a long-winded way of saying Valve has a lot of options ahead of it for open sourcing Steam VR tracking should it need to. And I would be more expecting, I would expect them to follow through on their promise of truly open sourcing that tracking system before end of lifing, like before killing off this entire system. Like I would rather see open source designs for the Lighthouse base stations, and I think they would follow through on that.
Sure, it's interesting to think of the base stations being. I don't think there's anything that's stopping someone right now from building a tracked object for Steam VR tracking, right? They make the kind of designs and chips available. If you're a partner, you can contact Valve and get that pretty easily. That's not what's stopping people. Also, the base stations, I think if you really wanted to make them, Pimax, I think, was going to make their own and decided not to. The problem is that, like, it is just kind of fundamentally somewhat expensive. Like, it's not like cameras that you're just
$150 per base station right now, right?
Sorry?
$150 per base station right now?
$150 for a base station compared to like $5 per camera on a headset or something like that kind of order. It's just quite a fundamentally expensive system. You're using moving parts. You've got these spinning hard drive motors, and then you have to have the photodiodes on the device, and each track device has to have, a relatively, decent amount of compute to do like the actual tracking. And the problem for it is that, sure, that was fine 10 years ago when computer vision just wasn't good enough, but today computer vision is good enough. And you can imagine a Bigscreen Beyond 3, and this is just us imagining and speculating, we don't know anything, that has, 4 cameras on it and does inside-out tracking, and that doesn't really add much weight, given that they added eye tracking in 1.05 grams. And you talk about like QR codes on the wall. Well, ironically, that was the Valve Room, right? The Room from 2014 when they were exploring tracking, and that's because you needed it back then, and today you don't. And the thing is, we have head tracking on Apple Vision Pro, on Quest 3, on Pico 4 Ultra, on all of these headsets that doesn't need these QR codes anymore. And you talk about, will it work in the dark? Well, on Apple Vision Pro and on Quest 3S, you have these infrared illuminators that can illuminate your hands, and even if you're relatively near a wall, the walls. And you can imagine just making those brighter and more powerful to illuminate more of your room, or putting, instead of just 2 of them, facing forward, you could have 4 of them pulsing outwards. You could have them kind of projecting a pattern. The point I'm trying to make here is that we're past the need for base stations and markers and things like that. And while I'm sure we'll talk more about Valve's headset at the end of the show in the Valve section, I just don't think Valve is going to do anything crazy. I think they're just going to do what everyone else is doing and put some cameras in the headset and do some SLAM computer vision tracking.
I'm ready. I'm ready to bring some fiducial markers on my wall. Okay, I'm there. Okay, so
you,
you
sorry, I was just going to say you can today with your Quest 3 and Vision Pro, and it will help, right? But they don't have to do anything, right? It's just you can put them on your wall, and by them being on your wall, your headset will see more patterns, right? Like if you were in a completely blank white room where the walls are white, the ceiling is white, the floor is white, and there's no patterns and there's nothing, and you're just the only thing there, these headsets wouldn't work, right? Like if the lighting was uniform and things like that, maybe they could work on shadows or something at best, but they probably wouldn't work. But if you were to put a bunch of QR codes on the wall like this, it would, right? Because it would have the kind of high contrast pattern features to track. So you can, if you ever do experience like bad head tracking in your room, and your room does happen to be very Spartan, go put up a modern art abstract painting on the wall, and it'll just work. These systems don't need to be designed for it. That's just inherent to how they work. So you could build this room right now, and it would make your headset tracking better if you did have a Spartan room, without any for them to support it.
Interesting. Very, very interesting to consider. And that's, I think, what I want to point out is, right, there's the underlying benefits of computer vision are still there, and we're kind of seeing it eke into the VR ecosystem. You can see VR Chat on its latest beta has a selfie cam, so you can get a whole upper body from the cam without having the facial animation software. And Bigscreen Beyond is actually a good fit for that kind of use case, where you can get some of the facial tracking without even going to the Beyond E model and adding that extra hardware. I'm seeing everyone all over the place in our comments talking about not going with anything that isn't Steam VR tracking. I have many. There's so many things to think about in this area, right? We want a solution that's robust, right? We want 6DoF tracking that just doesn't get interfered with. And even the Lighthouse base stations got occasionally interfered with. And you were pointing like if you've got a Spartan room, right? Like you don't want to have a Spartan room. You want to have stuff around you that you can grab and use for different things.
Yeah.
So like we need more robust tracking. And it's wild to think of all the people that went and installed infrared lights in their room. Like that's ultimately hundreds of thousands of people might have actually gone and done that step by just buying a $20 unit on Amazon.
Yeah, as you say, yeah, even if you don't have the 3S, if you just have the normal Quest 3 or whatever, just as you say, get a $20 IR emitter on Amazon. There you go. There's your base station, and now your tracking works in the dark. Your hand tracking won't yet, but on 3S it will. Your controllers will, because they're still pulsing those little IR LEDs. And I understand that there are some people that are like very attached to the base station tracking, but as Shalalaska says, when Valve goes slam, the Lighthouse diehards are going to have an existential crisis. I think Valve is just going to prove that if it's done right, it can be done well. And I've never been on my Vision Pro and thought this tracking isn't good enough, you know?
So imagine I'm in the SLAM powered Steam headset, Valve headset, the next one, and I go up to the Lighthouse base station and I tap it with my finger. And then I go over to the other Lighthouse base station and I tap it with my finger. Wouldn't that align those spaces with the computer vision spaces? And couldn't I then bring all of my existing objects in with some of that tracking? Or would it not be able to relay that back to my headset without the Lighthouse photodiodes? Like,
so yeah, you can do alignment, right? People do this already. There are tools for Steam VR, like open source add-ons that let you align these tracking spaces manually. So that's how people use Valve Index controllers with the Quest or Reverb G2, or how you can use the traditional HTC Vive trackers with Quest. And yeah, as you say, you just have to have some sort of manual alignment step where you touch something in one space or kind of put something in some way. There's a bunch of different ways you can do manual alignment. Could you do automatic alignment with computer vision? Could Valve literally just track the shape of a base station? If they're seeing an IR, could they kind of see the kind of patterns coming from the base station and go, there's that base station, there's that one, let's manually align these systems. Sure, they could. That's a very interesting idea, and that would mean that they would support all of those old accessories while the headset and controllers are still being done with computer vision. So a very interesting idea, yeah.
Cool. All right. So I'm excited. You heard it here first as David walked that through with me. And I would love to see something like that happen. And I think it's illustrative to me of where we are in this industry. We consider the idea that the controllers that are coming could have two triggers on them, matching L2 and L1 and R1 and R2 and left bumper and left trigger and left and right trigger on all your standard gamepads, thus aligning the entire Steam ecosystem around this singular input method. What I get at it from OpenXR to these controllers to the thing David and I just talked about, right? All of these platforms have like multiple layers, which they're kind of just waiting for the right time to open up to more people. On Meta's ecosystem, right? I've talked about it on the Gamescast. We have all these different accessories, David, that connect over Bluetooth in various ways to the headset. All of them are restricted in various ways by software that like Horizon is having to navigate because it doesn't own the way that Android handles permissions like Bluetooth. And so you have to have this really awkward handoff for all those cool accessories that you want to bring into a Meta Quest headset, but it's just not high on Meta's priority list because like they have to compete with Android, potentially changing a feature at any point. You pointed out on a previous article how easy it would be for devs to change or use Android's camera permission. I think it was. It's like automatic if they need to use the different camera permission from Android.
The Quest one, it uses the same Android API that Android XR will. So if you're building a computer vision app for Quest right now using the pass-through camera access, porting that over to Android XR will be trivial, yeah. But
so like I imagine it like a chessboard, and there's different pawns on the chessboard, and one of the pawns is like hand tracking. Another pawn, it's the tracking. It's these controllers is one of the pawns. Another pawn is OpenXR. Another pawn is SteamVR login. Right? You've got all of these things that you could leave out of future products, like they did with Steam Deck. You don't have to install SteamOS on a Steam Deck. You can install Windows. That's one of the pawns was SteamOS that they've got to play. And if the other players are like Meta, they've got Horizon OS and the Meta Band that's coming, and the Quest. I see this conversation in our audience about Quest 4. They could make the next headset from Meta so different and look so much like the Bigscreen Beyond that it doesn't look anything like the Quest. And in fact, they want to get away from the marketing associated with the Quest because of how much of a face brick people remember the Quest to be.
I think we've gone on all kinds of you've thrown on maybe 5 different big discussions there. Yep. We're going to have to, I guess, move on and keep that as food for thought. As LL says, they forget what topic we're on here. That was Bigscreen Beyond, and we're now going to move on to talk about Pico.
Fine, yeah. Let's move on, David. I think, David, I'm convinced that Apple learned some things from Bigscreen. I'm convinced that Meta will learn some things from Bigscreen, and we can leave it there.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, okay, I'm just going to sort of briefly say, I think there are some things, sure, but your argument used to be that they're going to learn the custom fit from Bigscreen, and Bigscreen's just thrown that out for Bigscreen Beyond 2, right? So at that point, it's like, what is it that they learn? Is it that if you take away all the standalone hardware, you can make it really light? Well, I think they know that, right? But they don't want to make PC VR hardware. And as it comes back to what I'm saying, it's good that Bigscreen can make stuff for enthusiasts, but making stuff for a few tens of thousands of enthusiasts is not what Apple and Meta wants to do. And so maybe, you see a bigger focus in Quest 4 on weight. That's something that you may see kind of happen there, but I think that was naturally going to kind of happen anyway. It's, that is a priority at Apple and Meta. They know that these headsets are too heavy, but when you do have to put the standalone computing hardware there, that's a lot more of a challenge, right? It's like, Bigscreen Beyond is not a standalone headset. As we've just discussed, it doesn't even have standalone head tracking. It is completely dependent on your PC for compute and completely dependent on these $150 each base stations for tracking. And that's not something that Meta or Apple will want to do anytime soon.
But I the IPD tool, why didn't Meta make the IPD tool? Why didn't Meta make it so that your eyes can each be adjusted for interpupillary distance? Why did they instead focus on lenses that fit all faces with a very wide fixed focus field of view?
They
Those are
don't.
choices.
You have IPD adjustment on a wheel on Quest 3. I think the answer would be because it's quicker and easier and lower friction, right? I really like the Bigscreen Beyond 2 solution, and it would be interesting if other headsets adopted it. But at the end of the day, picking a headset up and scrolling the wheel is a lot quicker than inserting a tool into each side and then adjusting it. And one of the problems with Beyond 2 is that they don't have even like a potentiometer or any kind of sensor to measure that. So you have to adjust your IPD with these tools on each side and then go in and adjust it in software as well. And James Laughlin is saying that you're arguing for asymmetrical IPD adjustment. Well, Apple does have that. That's how the Vision Pro works. If you use the Vision Pro, it uses eye tracking to move each lens to match each eye separately. Like that is something Apple, if you look at the Vision Pro's development cycle and how long it was in development, they were doing that before Bigscreen Beyond. I mean, obviously it came out before Beyond 2, right?
A mass headset, Mestor is Mars. Mass headset, you need a screwdriver to adjust. No, that ain't flying. All right, I get it. But like there's other things. Meta doesn't have stores in which you can bring in your headset and get it repaired, right? Like you have to ship it off to them. They also don't have a customer service. They're gonna outsource some of their customer service to other people. Like they don't have the structure in place, and they don't necessarily want to be that place. They don't necessarily want to do customer service. What they want to do is have you as a user, which is what they've always done with you, how they've always used you. And it's a different thing, right? To use a headset that's designed for that end principle in mind than to use one that to adjust. It's the same as switching carriers on a cell phone, which it's an arduous job to switch carriers on a cell phone, but you're switching face fits on a headset, right? Like it actually should take a minute for you to go through and adjust each eyeball. Anyways, David. I'm not taking the guilt here for getting us back on the subject. Okay, so we need to move us along.
Yeah, that was me this time. Let's talk about Pico 4 Ultra's new operating system update because we do want to chart this. Pico 4 Ultra is, I don't think anyone would disagree with this, the only direct like-for-like competitor to Quest 3, as in it's a similar price point. It uses the exact same chipset, just with a little bit of extra RAM. It's got the same kind of controllers and capabilities. Unfortunately, for anyone in North America, or fortunately, if you don't care, it's not sold in North America. In Europe, this matters. For our North American viewers and readers here, this isn't going to matter too much to you. But Pico OS does have some kind of interesting, unique stuff it does. Pico 4 has this unique accessory I'll talk about very shortly that Quest doesn't. And so it's interesting to see like what is the path not taken, because there's nothing that ByteDance can do on this headset that Meta couldn't do on theirs, because again, it's almost the same hardware as Quest 3. So this new update adds some interesting new features, and I'll just quickly run down these features. So the first is catching up to Meta and Apple free window positioning. So at launch, Pico 4 Ultra did have spatial computing where you can move 2D windows around, except they were all the same distance. So you can imagine this as if they're all pinned to a 360-degree bubble that you're inside. And so I can move the windows left and right and up and down, but they were all at the same distance. So I could never have them overlapping or to further distance. Really weird quirk. And I wonder what the technical reason for that is. Maybe it was just some giant texture that was being kind of computed in some way. Never to worry. This update gets rid of that. It's now got the same kind of free positioning. You can move them further away, overlap them as visionOS and HorizonOS. So that is just a catching up moment for Pico. The next one is something that is on visionOS but not on HorizonOS, and that's 2D to 3D image conversion. So you can convert any of your 2D images into 3D images. And that's a technology that we're seeing proliferate across the industry right now. It is something that computer vision has just figured out how to do. And so that means that you don't even need to have a 3D camera anymore to take 3D photos. You don't need an iPhone 16 or 16 Pro. You take your regular photos, and these headsets are now able to convert them. I expect Meta will probably ship this in the next year or so as well. The next feature is 3D screen recording. So I saw some confusion in the comments about this. Like Apple Vision Pro, Pico 4 Ultra from launch has been able to record 3D video by using the color cameras. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about 3D screen recording. So this includes the virtual and mixed reality elements. So if you're in a VR game recording, just like you might record on your Quest, it's a 3D video. It's recording both eyes, not just one of the eyes. So then you play it back in the headset and you see depth, even if you were in a VR game or in a mixed reality experience. Super cool. Surprised Meta hasn't done this. Maybe they will too. I guess it adds some strain to be recording both eyes at the same time, but it's an interesting thing. I guess it doesn't really matter if you're like sharing your gameplay footage out to flat screen people, but if you were sharing them to someone else that owns a headset, it's a nice feature to have. The next thing is Performance Tuner. So it's a new app on Pico from Pico that allows you to override graphics and performance options like the screen refresh rate, render resolution, GPU and CPU levels. Interesting way for developers to quickly tweak things. You can do all this with ADB commands on Quest, and there are some GUIs, but this is built into the system now for any developer. Next one, improved pass-through and hand tracking. They say they've reduced the latency and false touch of hand tracking, improved the stability in low light, enhanced gesture accuracy, improved alignment between your virtual hands and your real hands, fixed issues where hand rotations would interrupt dragging. Lots of little tweaks. They've been kind of gradually over time trying to get closer and closer to Quest hand tracking. The next thing and final thing is that they've improved body tracking. So if you're not familiar, Pico 4 Ultra has this accessory, these Pico trackers that are like on €70 or something like that. You strap them to your ankles and you get body tracking, and it's supported in a bunch of games, including things like Blade and Sorcery. It's something that Quest owners have been Quest enthusiasts, I should say, have been begging Meta for. Pico did it. They say with this new update, they've enhanced the posture stability during prolonged periods of sitting or lying down. So this is VR chat, where this is also supported. Increase the update frequency of full body motion tracking data, which improves the motion smoothness, improve flexibility of accuracy of complex lying positions, and just made other general improvements to body tracking. So some of these seem very focused on VR chat, where again, this is supported both on PC and standalone. If you don't have a PC, and the VR chat app on Pico 4, if you do, the Pico Connect app lets you use these there. So lots of little tweaks. We just want to point this out because we do point out the Quest improvements. And yeah, you can see that ByteDance is still clearly committed to updating some of these core functionality around Pico 4 Ultra. They have, over the past year and since the original Pico 4, dramatically withdrawn their focus on VR gaming. This is more of a spatial computing competitor focused on these virtual screens. One of the cool things it has, which Quest doesn't have, is wireless phone streaming. So you can see here, you have your iPhone here wirelessly, and then you can have your Mac as well, and then you can have physical screens. So I'm speaking very quickly, but I just wanted to get through all this super interesting stuff.
Hello to Guy Godin, the creator of Virtual Desktop, who just piped up in our comments there, saying that Pico added the proper OpenXR extensions for those trackers, by the way. We will be adding support in Virtual Desktop in an upcoming update. Guy, I'm curious about support for the Mocopi trackers as well, how that works in Virtual Desktop going forward. I'm very curious whether there's the Steam app for Mocopi, and I'm curious whether that can run alongside Virtual Desktop, whether you can run those together, as it's a really interesting idea. I see F Meister saying, I like Pico motion trackers for fitness. Big area for us to consider going forward. I think that's one of the killer areas for Apple to hit on its hardware over time. Kind of really there's lots of things to consider that they have to pull off software wise for it to be a good experience. We should move on to the next. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think that's an interesting thought, that one of the things that people really expected Vision Pro to be focusing on, and it hasn't really at all, is fitness. And I guess a lot of that is actually more the hardware, in my opinion. You have this thing that's like expensive and has these like glass front plate and has a tethered battery. It kind of just doesn't seem very well optimized for fitness. If you did have a cheaper version that was made out of like lighter and more resilient plastics, and maybe you have the batteries in the side rather than than in an external tethered battery, you might have that be more optimized. I wonder what we see around a possible Vision Air someday, whether that's more optimized for fitness, because Apple does have, Apple Fitness and Apple Health and things that it could port over.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing to consider about the future of the Apple Watch line. What I'd like to see is like the band that you put around the watch become for fitness. Like let's just make the band a fitness band, and then you can split off the fitness functionality from whatever you use the display for. Like one of the coolest things on the watch is the viewfinder, where you can like hold your phone like this and watch your watch like this and use it as a mobile viewfinder this way, or get like really strange angles or high angles and have it all be stabilized while watching it on your watch. It's kind of interesting. I
Yeah,
would
I do
love to
that on
see
the
it. Yeah.
Pixel Watch as well. It's a good way to frame a shot if you leave your phone like on a tripod or something. Yeah, pretty cool. I see Biggs pointing out a big problem with Vision Pro Fitness is that it has that motion blur. We've talked about how that's going to take next generation micro OLED technology to get rid of. That's another great point. You don't want to be moving too fast in a Vision Pro because it's not got great motion clarity. It's got great stable um, head clarity for, when you're just looking at something like a movie, but I'm moving my head right now in this Quest 3S, and there's no blur at all. We're at 120 hertz here, I should say, but I don't see any blur. And if I did this on a Vision Pro, I would see that kind of smearing. So I do think Apple is probably more hardware limited than software for headsets, but it's certainly something they'll get there eventually. And as commenters are pointing out, it's something that Pico is really focused on, has been for a while. A lot of their marketing around this is for fitness. So yeah, they don't really have as much focus on like trying to release an Arkham Shadow competitor or Asgard's Wrath 2 competitor or something like that, but they are still focused on maybe some of the more fitness focused side of gaming.
Does I want to talk about the holodeck, but now the commenters are pulling me back into our last subject, and I shouldn't let them. All right, so are we ready to talk about my holodeck trip and the walkable scale VR experience that I tried there? Yeah, I want to talk about this one for a little while here. This was a really incredible experience to try and see out in Austin, Texas. And what I'm going to start this off with is a data point that I got out of two of the people involved in the networking here. So, for those who might just be tuning in to us for the first time, please hit this, share our link out to others, let them understand how, VR works. Track, render, display is how every VR headset ever made works. It tracks your movement, it renders a world to that movement, and then it displays that to your eyeballs. Every system in the world does that, and David is one of the best hardware reporters, the best hardware reporter in the world at breaking down like the physics, like the physical limitations to making the track render display cycle work at 90 frames per second while dissipating heat and rendering for you all of the visual detail that you would love out of your flight sim game or your preferred PC game that is going to require an extraordinarily expensive PC. Over the last, I went and interviewed, I went face to face with John Carmack, circa 2015, at one of the Connect events, and he says it does not look good for making inside out positional tracking that does not consume a whole lot of power. And they went and figured it out with the Quest, right? And we have all these products today that give us fixed off tracking, and then it renders it on the device itself, and then immediately displays it for you. And you get that to 90 frames per second. And that's how we end up with our wonderful VR experience here that's standalone and doing this all within the headset. But there are other ways of doing that. And what I saw in the holodeck in Texas was them doing it with the tracking being done by these OptiTrack cameras up here, looking at the shape of these antlers on this little thing on the top of this Quest Pro. I'm wearing a Quest Pro. They've modified it with batteries. They've got facial pads on there to make it feel more comfortable when it's on my head. And then in the other room nearby, they've got they've got more than that, but they've got 5 4090 NVIDIA PC rigs that are rendering the world for me. So they're receiving the tracking data over a wired connection, going back to where my headset is. Then they're rendering the world over on those PCs, and then it's getting beamed over Wi-Fi, Airlink, to this headset where I am enjoying photorealistic, really, really realistic renditions of $1 million homes that are going to be built in the Austin area or being planned for the exact spot where this holodeck is today in Austin. So they're going to take this away, and then there will be $1 million homes in that location. They are actually talking about there's going to be other amenities that they're planning there. But this cycle that I just outlined for you, the difference in that cycle between the standalone headset computer that we're using right now to provide this show and what I'm seeing here in this studio is the source of so much strife in the community. Everyone looking at what they loved about VR in 2016 with PC VR, what they loved in Half-Life Alyx, all those detailed worlds that are PC only, right? Like the things that you're enjoying in Flight Simulator today with a 50 series graphics card. All that stuff that's missing in standalone VR unless you go and get a beefy Wi-Fi, a nice, good throughput line connection between your headset and your PC to do a process that's ultimately very similar to what's happening here in this holodeck to produce that track render display. So I had to explain that to all the new viewers out there. I'm sure the commenters are discussing this idea overall, and I can't wait to look at the comments. But I need it before I look at the comments. I need to share one thing that I got at Amanda Watson and Dan. I can't think of his last name right now. The person who's running this network, this local network on the Hill. Apparently, they're also the person who runs the networking for QuakeCon. And I've started a conversation about what would it take for us to see 100 HMDs at QuakeCon with people carding in just big screen beyonds and headsets that are very, very slim to begin to prove what we're all saying here, that actually you don't have to card in a big table and a big, like you can bring in a chair. You can bring in a box that goes under the chair. You can put on your HMD, and you're there at the LAN party with everyone else with a big, giant screen in front of you. And I want to think about that. Like, what is keeping us from having that experience? Why aren't there more HMDs at QuakeCon? And I got this fact out of Amanda Watson and Dan, the guy who's running the network here, out in this hill in Austin. They use about 200 gigabytes of, they generate about 200 gigabytes of data per 5-person tour through the track render display cycle of beaming all of this information around the network. So you start doing the math on that, divide 200 by 5 people, you get, 40 or something gigabytes, and then you divide that by minute. An average trip in here is 30 minutes, so they've timed it to try to be a 30-minute tour. What you end up with is, I think it's about 1.2 gigabytes of generated data that is transporting around your local wireless network. My point being, a 30-minute tour for 5 people requires that 200 gigabytes of data go around this wireless network. And all of us, you, David, me, everyone in our audience, are programmed to think about a file getting installed on our hard drive. What we're not programmed to think about is 90 hertz frame delivery reliably occurring over a Wi-Fi connection with 5 different people simultaneously, all on a different channel of Wi-Fi so that they don't interfere with one another, and not a single frame gets dropped between its generation over its rendering over on the PC and then it getting delivered over Wi-Fi over to your headset. How do we end up with uh, spatial ops where it looks as visually beautiful as Half-Life Alyx, and you've got 2 teams of 4 people on either side of an arena, and you all are running around as if it was like a realistic military sim that looks visually incredible. But you've got 2 teams of 4 on the squad, and it's being rendered on a 5090 machine over there, right? We're talking about Wi-Fi being the limiting factor here. And I have to say that, right? Like our wireless is not good enough to give us the VR we want.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this to me is that so many VR arcades are pretty much a bad version of this, right? I've been a real critic of a lot of these experiences that you go to. I'm not going to name names right now, but you'll find them in many cities. You have these kind of big IPs that are in them, and you go there with your friends, and it's like something to do instead of playing bowling or going to like laser tag it. And the problem is that in many cases you go to this, and it is this same concept conceptually. You have PCs somewhere in the corner or in another room rendering and then sending it over Wi-Fi, and then having the headsets, do the tracking or using a tracking system like this. But it's bad. It's like there is a visible delay. The latency is terrible, and it really ruins the experience. So I guess I'm wondering, just can you confirm, like, these are obviously industry experts that have been around doing this for a long time. Did they get it right? Like, you haven't really said. You're in this. Is the tracking good? Is it low latency? Are the graphics good? What was the experience like of this? Have they figured it out?
Yeah, so fantastic question. And remarkably, David, it's the tracking that was the biggest limiting factor across this experience. So OptiTrack, I'm using OptiTrack for the walkthrough. The people come to this. I go read the article. I walk through the entire tour, the entire flow of how they're doing the sales pitch. They're experiencing OptiTrack on Quest Pros. They can see out the bottom of the headset to see where their feet are, and they're being distracted by a human sales pitch who is directing their attention at various sites as we're walking around the thing. And after I did this full 30-minute walkthrough where I got to see all of these homes exactly like the people who are ready to buy these homes do, they went and put me in a Quest 3, and the Quest 3 had shared spatial anchors active for one of the demos.
Sure, instead of OptiTrack.
Yeah. So I was using shared spatial anchors near the end of this instead of OptiTrack. And the difference was night and day in the quality of the experience, in my ability to walk confidently and quickly from one spot to another. When I went through in this experience, when it was 5 people or 6 people, OptiTrack was tracking all of those different headsets simultaneously, sending them back to all of those PCs and sorting out which one is which. But there were some hitches in that OptiTrack experience, and it made me like I was moving more slowly relative to all the other people. I could see their headsets in VR walk around with me.
So just to be clear, you're saying it was night and day in favor of the Quest 3 with shared spatial anchors?
In favor of night and day, in favor of the shared spatial anchors being a superior experience to the OptiTrack. However, it was one person. I was one person or 2 people walking around with the shared spatial anchors instead of 5.
So
for all those camera systems.
That's my kind of understanding here, is that like a lot of people in the comments are like, wait, why do you need to do any of this when these standalone headsets already track themselves? And so shared spatial anchors, for people that aren't aware, is how these headsets natively do co-location, where the developer marks a spot in the real world, a 6th position on one headset, the spatial anchor, and then shares that to other headsets. And they kind of compare their SLAM maps, their kind of feature cloud of the environment, and figure out where is this point on the other headsets? And so while if you're doing one person here, as you say, the tracking's fine. The problem with shared spatial anchors is that they aren't really designed for very large environments yet. Right now, they're still designed for relatively small rooms, right? For you're doing, Demio on a table together. It's not really designed for like a warehouse scale yet. And so I just wonder how many software updates are we from the OptiTrack not being necessary at all. It just seems to me that this is like very, very close to being a solved problem. And I would argue maybe even they can use the camera access on Quest 3 that's available now to do QR code alignment. Yeah, that it seems like I'm sure they've discussed this. Now that you can do that on Quest, like as of literally last week, you could do manual alignment as a developer using computer vision and get rid of all of this hardware, because this is tens of thousands of dollars and maybe even like $100,000 based on my understanding of the pricing of OptiTrack.
Oh yeah. And that's why this is such a big idea to consider, right? They've tested everything. These are the anti-latency lights that they've put in the ceiling. And to give you an example of the level of design that they're considering, I went through this with the integrators who created this holodeck. The anti-latency lights are usually put on the floor and they look up. But what they wanted to do was, number one, give people the grounding of being able to see their feet below them so that they don't feel like they're constantly going to be tripping. And then number two, when they look down at the flooring, they want the floor, the directionality of these physical tiles to match the direction of the wood paneling in the VR experience they're looking at, so that there's a one-to-one sort of handoff between the two spaces. You feel more immersed in VR by looking at the physical floor. They've in effect created a really low budget way of doing mixed reality by letting you see what you need to see below you that way. It's a really, really cool idea. And then I had an argument or debate with Kyle. I don't know if Kyle's out there, about whether I could really call what they're doing in here redirected walking, because we all have a model in our mind for the holodeck automatically redirecting your walking for you. We all imagine the computer, if you look over here, what it can do is take a door that's over here and position it to over here by 2 feet. And then when you look back over here, you didn't notice that the door actually moved. And if you nudge people enough in little ways like that, you can have them walking around an endless VR space. We've seen some cool ideas for this. I can't remember the Into the God or T for God.
T for God, yeah.
Yeah. T for God experience that tested some of these ideas. They do redirected walking here through human intervention, through a sales pitch that says, why don't you look over here at the bar area? Have you noticed the ice cubes inside of the water dispenser over there? Like that's what my experience was, but you can imagine a real sales pitch here behind here, because I wasn't in the market for one of these homes, but imagine in the market for one of the homes and they point you to the linens and the menu and all the things, and they direct your attention with a human. And our models aren't built for that. We're like, that's not redirected walking. I'm sorry, that is redirected walking. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly blurs the line. So my understanding is that these homes that they're selling with this, the real estate, are multi-million-dollar homes. And, an interesting response I saw to this article was a company from Lithuania who say that they're doing the same thing with just Quest 3 headsets, no computers, no off-board rendering, no crazy Wi-Fi network, no OptiTrack, just on Quest 3. And I've kind of reached out to them because I'm very, very interested in their approach. And I think they're selling much lower cost homes. So it kind of balances there. That I assume the one thing you didn't really answer is, I assume because they're doing this, the graphical fidelity is good, right? The virtual objects you're seeing are like PC VR quality rather than kind of Quest quality. Can you just confirm that directly?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's all PC quality visuals, and it's beyond PC quality visuals that you're used to. One of the scenes in this room, so I'm in a Quest 3 right now, that David's got running Performant on the Quest 3. And over here I have what's essentially a mirror. It's a camera, but it's a mirror of what I'm seeing. in this experience, one of the rooms you go to is in a bathroom. And you go into the bathroom, and there's a mirror here and a mirror there, and you can see the headset mirrored twice inside the reflection of the reflection going back. They're ray tracing that reflection across multiple times on those 4090 rigs. They took me to an arboretum sort of experience, like the beautiful pool area that they have planned for this area, and they had trees located everywhere, and there was just tons of leaves covering all these trees. And you stand under one of these trees and you look up, and you're feeling like you're looking through a garden, an actual garden. It's something like you don't ever feel in VR. Like there's so much trickery done to try to give you the sense of foliage, and it's not the same as just rendering a whole bunch of leaves directly in front of you. That was one of the experiences they showed me, and it was outstanding. So yes, PC visuals in all of the benefits of standalone form factor, right? Like it's the dream we all want. Everyone's working towards. They told me they had Andrew Bosworth out here. They had John Carmack out here. As I mentioned, the creator of Airlink, Amanda Watson, was out there working on this. But they had the others there just as guests, and they're like, it's wild to think that, like, and notice what headset this is. I'm not like, this is I believe.
Play for Dream.
Yeah, I believe that's the Pay for Dream. And she was like, I don't mean to be advertising for them. It was a cool photo to have her fixing the Wi-Fi. She pointed out to me to crop out the Wi-Fi router that she's editing. Like there's a Wi-Fi router with data on the back of it. It's like, maybe don't include the serial number of the Wi-Fi router on the back of it. So I cropped that out. But this is the most cyberpunk stuff imaginable to me, right? They're trying to figure out how do we get 5 people to share Airlink simultaneously using last generation. This is the Play for Dream, but I was using the Quest Pro. How do we make this feel great? Point is, they've put more than 1,000 people through these demos. I think the current count is 1,500 people. And you imagine you've come straight from the airport where you flew in on a private jet, probably. You came over, driven to this hillside. They've driven you up an Escalade to this hill. I've got the video showing the view that you see at the top of the hill. And then you go into this holodeck where they put on the Quest Pro with the antlers on you for 30 minutes. And they say that the 1,500 people that have done this, they all complete the 30-minute journey. It's comfortable enough for them to complete the 30-minute journey. And it's interesting enough what they're seeing once they've made this whole trip that they spend the whole time on that. Like what that means to me is it's at least as good as the Void, right? Like this is in the ballpark of a Void experience, even though it's doing this different sort of arrangement than backpacks. Like we've gotten rid of the backpacks, but it's still not one-to-one what we would get out of standalone tracking and rendering and all those things. This is going to be a touchstone article for me going forward, David. I'm going to bring it up a lot, so you might want to add Holodeck to your bingo cards here if it wasn't already on those bingo cards, because this proved to me that you can actually do it. You can actually do it with VR hardware. We know where the bottlenecks are, and the biggest bottleneck for us right now is local Wi-Fi. To me, I imagine, David, we've talked about this before, but now I've got a clearer picture of this. Imagine taking a mall, and we Faraday cage the mall. You put on some kind of dampening field so no outside radio signals come into the mall, right? And then you go to the entrance to the mall on one of the 4 sides, and you rent out a Wi-Fi channel for yourself to use over the course of this mall stride. And you walk, that's it, right? You're now channel 5 of 100 to walk through this mall, exactly like they did in that one movie. That's the City with 1,000 Planets, when they've got the bazaar out there in the desert, right? You could literally do that by renting out a Wi-Fi channel and going and just figuring out how to share space by renting out that Wi-Fi channel with 100 others who don't torpedo your experience by interfering with your Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I want to see more holodecks. I want to see more of these spaces, these malls that aren't being used anymore, these warehouses that are not there. I want to see those turned into holodecks. And Little Scampy is just asking you to confirm that they have actually sold property with this, and the answer to that is yes, if I'm correct. Yeah, this has
Uh,
been
uh,
selling property.
According to the people who are running this property and building this thing, I encourage you to go read my article. I have yet to meet Jonathan Kuhn, the person who is behind this project. He runs a project called Impossible Ventures, and if you go to impossible, you type in impossibleventures.com into your browser right now, you'll be redirected to his LinkedIn page where you can read the About Us, about me in his LinkedIn page. And there's a very simple story there that is kind of eye-opening for just the level of thought this person is putting into their project. This is a multi-year project that we're going to come back to over time. And according to him, he has dozens of houses under contract, so dozens of people have signed their name to take a property or a house here when it's done, and become part of the planning for this project. And I think he put the number at nearly $500 million in sales that he claims to have done by walking people through this holodeck. So he's suggesting the person the URL you can go and investigate yourself. I have yet to meet him face to face. I'd like to. We will be pursuing future stories on this because ultimately they have to build it, right? They have to now go and build everything that they're selling people on, just like Bigscreen Beyond 2, just like Immersed out there with their visor, right? Now show us what this actually looks like completed. And the amazing thing is, right, they gave me a book. I had to cart a book back from Austin, Texas to my home in New York, and now it's on my bookshelf here. And my intention is to hold on to that book until this is constructed. And now I can take this book of CGI, computer generated imagery, back to the location and say, okay, wait, this is way different than you planned it. They've already got a whole bunch of changes to the community that aren't represented in the holodeck experience, right? Like they've already had to make changes to their overall master planning that are different than the people who were paid to render and build this experience had at the time that they made it a year or two ago. So it's It's going to be fascinating to compare before and after as this project comes to fruition.
Yeah, super interesting stuff. And that is, as a lot of commenters are pointing out, a lot of money. So as you say, they better really deliver on that, right?
All right. So yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for the red. It's called red. It's called Redbox. There's Redbox Realty in Bentonville or Fayetteville, Arkansas. I saw it when I was out there, and they are building homes into storage containers. Very nice looking homes where you've got windows instead of storage container around it. But I mean, imagine 100 of those. I'm ready to get really radical of this. Why don't we pick up the storage containers to move them away from climate change when we know the flood is coming? Why don't we move our homes away from climate change?
Sorry, as shipping containers or as homes?
Yeah, shipping containers is home, just like Ready Player One.
Yeah, I was going to say that does sound exactly like Ready Player One. Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. You guys want cheap homes. You guys are asking for cheap homes with this idea. Okay, I decided to go there for you. All right, let's move on, David.
I think I was getting into some politics and philosophy of housing there. Yeah, so that really interesting discussion here. A lot of the comments here. Is there anything you want to kind of respond to in the comments around this before we move on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I answered the sales question, and you know the limit of our information. I've heard all sorts of interesting things like you stand on the top of that hill, and the salesperson was telling me about the neighbors of this property. Like it's wild that this is how it happens, right? This is how the world gets reshaped. And you go see my article. 1939 was when they literally made the waterway here. Like it's the Colorado River that they dammed up in 100 years, over 100 years, or almost 100 years ago. And they created this entire beautiful little area of Austin or area of Texas that you can go and enjoy the waterways. You've got an arts district, you've got music, It's like it's humans reshaped the land 100 years ago, and I'm pointing out here that like here we are again, and this takes time. This is the scale of decades to build out these things, and I love, David, that you're following the cheaper versions of these holodecks, like the bootstrapped versions of these. But I'm going to really crazy ideas like we should go into holodecks and leave public comment on them. Like we should have more customizability to our communities by going into and getting to see space before it actually is molded. This is something that billionaires are doing on the regular. Like if you go and see a big building in VR before it's actually constructed today. But right now, that demo only gets to about 20 people or something, or 30 people. I'm discussing what does it look like when you have a couple thousand people go and do that demo.
Sure, yeah, and it just makes so much sense for architecture in general and anyone building a home. I mean, it doesn't have to be billionaires and the people we're talking about here. It doesn't make sense to me that in the near term anyone gets a home built without being able to explore it in VR and mixed reality first. And it does seem that like this is setting the way. And obviously, just like most new technologies, it's going to start with the kind of most experimental version for rich people. But this is something that like, as you say, every city, every town should be able to have a holodeck for purposes like this that people rent out for various reasons. And you can imagine even beyond real estate, the potential use cases for this.
I had someone in my inbox telling me that they've got a new luxury train line running through the United States, and I was asking them about their amenities, and they're like telling me about augmented reality amenities, and just scratching my head about it. Where we're like, no, what I want on my public transport is very high output power that I can plug in my computing device to, and I want a reclining chair with, that's it. That's my trip with my VR headset.
Well, and very high quality internet, right?
Yeah, and very high quality. Yeah, thank you, David.
Don't start me and Henry on this.
Oh God, no. Yeah, no. That's a whole philosophical. Put Starlink on your bingo card going forward, because it is going to be the subject of much of our conversations going forward of how that changes things. But yeah, it's just, my point is amenities everywhere are not built for VR headsets. Like the people out there literally cannot comprehend. The video that I included in the article, I sat for the X-Men scene, where he's the slow motion scene that everyone loves from the new X-Men movies. They showed that to me in a virtual theater on this hill in Austin, and I'm looking at it and going, why? You've just shown me hundreds of millions of dollars worth of amenities that you plan to build on this hill in Austin. You've shown me basketball courts, racquetball courts, golf simulators to practice your swing. You've shown me all of these amenities, including pools. Let's leave the pools out of it, right? All the other ones with flat floors, right? All of those amenities would be better in a VR headset, where like you can use a multi-purpose room and have a game of paintball without the sting of a paintball hitting you, without the splatter of it, without the lost ammo. You have a gun range. You have all of these things available to you in a multi-purpose holodeck recreation center. And that isn't even what they are thinking about as they put this thing together. All they want to do is sell homes. If they sell homes, they've succeeded. Right now, we can think about the other thing later.
That's a super interesting idea, right? As a use case, you can imagine like a new apartment building gets built and, there's 500 different apartments there. And you have maybe 4 or 5 different holodecks that can do these multi-purpose things. Whereas today, some apartment buildings, as you say, they might have like a room that has, some foosball and a table tennis table and something like that, or like a cinema or something like that. You can imagine just how much better that would be with VR and mixed reality headsets. So a really interesting comment here I want to bring up from Reduced Gravity, who said, I built my own office studio in my backyard and created it first in VR before I started building. I even animated the sun so I could see where the sun would come in through the windows. That's really interesting, Reduced Gravity. Let us know what software you used for that. We'd really love to know what the details are behind that. And, maybe leave a comment after the show with more details if you don't have time now for the details.
Tips at UploadVR.com. I'll reiterate that call out there. I did it on Gamescast where we were talking about the pinball, the Arcade 2 XR TV. God, I hate that name. It needs to be smoother. But a really, really cool product there. And we were talking about that. And sorry for the beeping if you're hearing in the background. I've got something that's gotten unplugged, and I have to figure out how to deal with it.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, I think it's my uninterrupted power supply telling me that it's been interrupted, so I have to solve that situation at some point. I don't want to get up, so I'm trying to mute it. It's like if you guys in the comments have started timing when the thing is, I can mute it before it goes off in the future. But like this is I love that idea. So they're saying they use Blender. What else did they use out there?
Unity and Blender. So they're shaping in Blender and then going in and exploring it in Unity. That's really, really great to know. And I see James O'Loughlin saying that you could do that on Unreal Engine too. Exactly. And Big's pointing out to our previous discussion that they think that what you need is to be able to just bring your own device for this kind of thing, future Quest type headsets that work at world scale. And I agree with that. It would be ideally you are just bringing your own device. It doesn't seem practical from a hygiene or practicality perspective that you have these headsets like pre-installed or something like that.
Let's go full circle with this. And I honestly didn't think about it until I was in VR with you guys and thinking about this. But imagine going around your home, David, and scanning all of your furniture, right? And getting an accurate scan of every furniture item that you get. And then you take that to the realtor, right? And you say, drop this into my home, my new home. Drop my screen that I've got right here. I would like to drop this into 5 of your floor plans. So here's my home. Here's all the things in it. Now I want to drop it into 5 of your different core floor plans. You're going to stand over there as the realtor, and I'm going to take my hand in the open air and place every item from my house where I want it to go into the new home. Right now, the only way you have to customize a home is like, where do you want the electrical outlets to go? And like for the people in our audience who have bought a home over the course of VR, I share your joy that you felt when you put the electrical outlets up near the top of the wall in the corner, exactly where the Lighthouse base station is supposed to go. Like I felt the joy that you felt when you went and customized a home. I know people who have done it, but like how sad is it that that's the only amount of customization we are actually able to make into something that costs so damn much money? It's stupid.
So as James O'Loughlin points out, I don't think you need like a realtor involved there. You can imagine that being done. Sorry, am I back now?
You appear to be back. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I was just going to say, you could imagine that being done in a VR app that runs on your Quest, your Apple Vision Pro, right? Once you do have computer vision that's good enough to literally remove furniture from your room, or as you say, scan out the furniture and bring it into a virtual environment, you can imagine starting in pass-through mixed reality, scanning your furniture, you click done and ready to go, you go into full VR in a new home that you're designing, and you place in that furniture. This is stuff that could be done in the home. And then when you design your dream home and everything's good to go, then you send that over to the realtor and you figure out how to get that done in reality.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. So you need you need someone who's going to take the dream home that you've made in VR and actually get the builders to build it on the budget that they said that they're going to build it on. And we're talking about, you're talking about a lot of transformation, a lot of upending of just everyone everywhere, but I don't think it's unfeasible. Like I don't think that's not going to happen. It's going to happen, and there's going to be people that are going to build new builder. Imagine a builder that embraces this and starts overtaking the existing building landscape for it.
Dare I say, the humanoid robots follow the design that you made in VR and start building things together. I mean, we joke, but if you look, all of the big tech companies now are heavily focused on robotics and realizing that right now the advancements in machine learning and world understanding and in robotic actuators are such that in the next decade, just as AI software is going to be important, just as VR and AR is going to be important, robotics is going to be one. And we talk about Meta Reality Labs as being Meta's wearables and metaverse division. Well, recently, we should note that they've actually added a third pillar to that. It's now wearables, metaverse, and robotics. And Meta wants to be in there just as everyone else does. They want to be the kind of the Android of robotics, and you can imagine all of the integrations there that are possible in the next decade.
Oh yeah, you think about an electrician wearing the Meta Ray-Ban glasses while they're doing their electrician work, and that being the training data for a robot that accomplishes that task in about 3 to 5 years. And I mean, let's be very blunt about that being the path. I don't know. Sorry, I liked LL's comment. Haha, they're talking about buying homes. I get it, and the I get the frustration or the I'm tired of the negativity out there because it feels like the negativity empowers people to tell you how your future is going to be built for you, right? Like we should think about that, right? All the negative effects of all this stuff. But I pointed out in this article, we're still on a path where you can take a self-driving car from the airport to a gated community and never interact with a single soul the entire trip. And like, what does that mean? What does if you're going to separate yourself from people that much? Well, you're also going to go visit with people, but how and when and where? Like, those are all active questions we're going to be exploring. And I have had a wonderful, thank you for this space to talk about the holodeck, David. We are going to keep coming back to it. Add the holodeck to your bingo cards. I apologize for anyone. I don't think I've hit their bingo cards too much today, David.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting topic. I really recommend people go and read Ian's article. It's a detailed look into this. And as Ian pointed out, you got some of the veterans of the industry, including Amanda Watson, the inventor of Airlink, working on this. So it's a super interesting one. And we're going to keep track of all these kind of projects. Let's move on to our final two sections. So each of these sections has two topics. So there's 4 more topics in 2 more sections. The first topic we're going to talk about here is these 2 upcoming Quest Horizon OS features, being the meta avatars of virtual webcam, and then the data mining that shows 2D screen sharing could be coming soon. Then we'll talk about the Valve section, where again, if you missed the start of the show and we talked about what we're going to discuss, we're first going to talk about my editorial about Valve's investment in VR gaming, or lack of it, which Ian disagrees with, so we'll get a good argument there. And then we'll finish off with Steam VR data mining revealing some potential details about a Valve Deckard, or at least one proof of concept. So let's go ahead and get straight into that first discussion about the feature that is live now in the public test channel of Horizon OS v76, the operating system for Quest headsets. The public test channel is like the beta version. You can opt in and get features sooner, with the trade-off, of course, that you're often going to get instability, bugs. It's not designed to be stable. If you want stability, funny enough, stay on the stable version. But if you are on this PTC, you'll have this feature. And basically what they've done is they've implemented the Android API for accessing your selfie camera. So if you sideload right now on the PTC a video calling app, be that, Microsoft Teams or Zoom, or even just the phone version of WhatsApp or Messenger, and I've tried all these out, and you try to do a video call and you access the selfie camera, you'll now see, well, the other person will now see your Horizon OS meta avatar. And that will be animated from your hands, from your head movements, and your lip movement will be estimated just as our lip movement is being estimated now from microphone audio. And if you follow Apple Vision Pro, you'll know that this is a feature that has been on Vision Pro since day one through your Apple persona. That it, if an app tries to access the selfie camera, if you're running even an iPad app, that's what they will get, this virtual camera feed. So a few notes on the details of this. It does not use the audio to expression technology that Meta introduced recently. It does not use inside-out body tracking. So technically, it's actually very primitive. I don't see this as super compelling personally. I don't think any normal person, at least, and I use that to say like someone not included in this technology is going to want to see this on the other end of their video call. But I think this is probably just like a step one. They've done the API such that when codec avatars are available, it just works by default, right? And so as long as apps support this, it's using the regular Android API. There's no need to do any support here. Then they can move this over to codec avatars in the future.
It's funny. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm trying to think of how they flip the switch on codec avatars. How do they survive the criticism that will come if they don't hold up to real world usage the same way that we saw depicted in that one call or that one video call that they did. And remember that one example of codec avatars used in the wild on that podcast, Lex Friedman's podcast, right? They didn't acknowledge that it was a PC based system publicly, right?
I think they hinted at it, but didn't directly say it.
Yeah, imagine that discussion, right? Like we like, why hide that? Like what does that say about your platform if you have to kind of like not talk about that?
In fairness, it's not like he was asked about it and didn't say. This was Lex Friedman's channel, his interview. He wasn't really talking about it. This is the kind of one we're talking about here. But you're right to say that there are big, high expectations for codec avatars. One thing I would say in favor of this, though, is that it is a lot easier to start with just a 2D view of codec avatars than doing a 3D version. In fact, it's like so much easier. You can use some of the current models that are coming out of machine learning to generate these already on a smartphone based on the face tracking data. So I think what we could see is that codec avatars arrive firstly just for this feature, just to show up as a virtual webcam. And it is a literally 2D view. They're not actually rendering a 3D model. It is a system that is designed to just do codec avatars, but in this 2D webcam frame, years before we see true 3D codec avatars. And actually, on a smaller time scale, that's what was there with Vision Pro, right? At Vision Pro's launch, the spatial personas weren't there. They didn't exist. It was just this 2D rendered version of your persona for the longest time in Apple Vision Pro. And then they delivered the spatial personas. And even then, like the spatial personas, they're great and they're the best way to hang out with someone remotely, I would say. But, they do leverage these Apple spatial personas. They do leverage expensive hardware and they are missing like most of the body. They don't include the arms. They're kind of ghostly in their appearance. They're not sharp, right? There is like this inherent blurriness to the face. I am amazed that Apple did pull this off on shipping hardware at all, but it's not the same quality of like the research we've seen out of Meta. So there's a long way to go.
It passes a business. It passes a test of being comfortable with business interactions, even though it kind of fails a personal test. So if you have someone that really knows your face, knows you, and then you show them this avatar, they might be off put by it, and we've noticed that amongst many people in our community, right? Meta is the social network company. That's Facebook 2.0. Is like literally its name. So how do they make sure that you cross that barrier for everyone, not just like a certain subsection of your people that like want a glow up version of you, not like a version of you that's, I don't know, that's got all the rough edges. Like there's certain, I don't know. It's a tough area. It's a huge rough area. But I love your outlining this, David, exactly how it would work. Back in 2020, Spaces did demos for us of their similar sort of realization that they could turn the webcam of a Zoom call into a direct line into a VR space. And then a few years later, we could see Spaces exactly played out as the foundation of their video calling platform that uses these personas for them. So like it's interesting to see Meta arrive at the same place. You can imagine Android sort of doing the same thing. I would, imagine how many Zoom calls are by default camera off, right?
Yeah,
and
a lot of them, right?
Yeah, how much better would they be if you had maybe a simple little avatar that made you realize that the person is actually there in front of the camera, right? Without even them actually saying anything. You could, the avatar could go away if the person is in front of the camera, and even that alone would improve the experience, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it also allows you to kind of do this while you're on the move, right? If you're in a cafe, if you're on a train, you're on a plane, you're not going to want to go on a video call with webcam for obvious reasons. But if you're sitting there on the train or the plane with your headset on already, it makes a lot of sense. But I do want to just point out that we are kind of highly, at least I am, I think you probably agree, skeptical of the current implementation of this being used by anyone at any scale other than kind of the most extreme enthusiasts. It's not good, right? These are the advantage of avatars that make these fine even above video calls is when you're in VR mixed reality, because you have two things. You have a shared sense of space. You have the same coordinate space, right? If I point to this part of Ian's tablet, he sees my hand point there. If I'm pointing here, he sees this, right? If we're picking up a physical object or passing it to each other in a different experience, that's there. We can draw on a whiteboard together. That's thing one. Thing two is spatial audio. If you're in certain VR experiences, you can be in a meeting with 10 people and you can hear each person's audio coming from their mouth. And it's really good across all the platforms now, right? All of these companies have got really like laser accurate positional audio. Where if you're trying to do a video call and you have 10 different webcam grids in front of you, not only do you not have a shared sense of space, right? Everyone's just this disembodied floating head, but it's all one audio track, right? You could do positional audio down to everyone's face, but it's not enough of a distance separation to matter. And it doesn't get associated with a body, right? So you cannot have 10 people speak at once in a Zoom call. You just can't. And that's why Zoom calls are done in this really artificial, ugly way where it's like everyone unmutes and mutes and talks separately and like takes turns. Whereas I've been in VR meetings where you have 5 or 10 people around a virtual conference room and you can have a real lively conversation like you have in reality. And that's something that even these avatars can do when you're in the headset all together. The problem with this feature is that it doesn't have either of those advantages, because this is to reach out to people who are on flat screens. And so you lose all of that. You get the worst part of these avatars, which is that they're just cartoons, without the advantages, which is the shared sense of space and positional audio. And so that's why I'm really skeptical of this initial implementation. And again, even with the codec avatars, it still misses out what really matters, right? Like why do we keep saying that when we do get those codec avatars that they're better than a video call, right? Because they're at full scale, one-to-one scale, positional audio, shared sense of space. You can do things together in that space, not just be a floating webcam in front of each other.
Yeah, I'm seeing LL talk about the Ghibliification filters that have been making everywhere, and they didn't even know. So I got to just make a personal recommendation to go see My Neighbor Totoro. For you, LL, and anyone else out there, go give My Neighbor Totoro a watch and feel the pace of a different time in animation, a different type of storytelling, and go enjoy what human artists made there a couple decades ago, and then compare it to what you're talking about, why people are calling it slop, right? Like, style transferring a Ghibli movie doesn't make you capable of making a Ghibli movie. So, but you can still, it's still a wonderful advancement of the face filter technology. Right now, we can imagine that we were in a Ghibli movie a little easier, but the storytelling part of it is still a lot of work, and that's what people are referring to when they refer to it slop.
Yeah, I mean, God, the ethics discussion there is something I don't think we have time for, but I'm remarkably impressed by it. I've been, most of my social media feeds have been taken over with it. I've been playing around with it. That new, if you don't know what we're talking about, ChatGPT 4.0 image generation technology is like breakthrough stuff. It's as significant for image generation as like the original ChatGPT was for chatbots. It is world-changing stuff in terms of how good it can be. You can, again, I don't want to get into the ethics discussion. I'm just saying from a technological perspective, like the criticism of, there's kind of two criticisms of this. Well, one is, of course, the ethics, and the old criticism was, well, it looks like crap. It doesn't look like the right, style. People have 6 fingers. The quality standard is done, right? From my perspective, like these look like they are really from the source material, but the ethics issue is still there. And of course, the ethics issue is something that people can absolutely debate around, and it's going to be one of the fiercest debates of technology in this decade, right? It already is a huge, fierce debate. Some people have extremely strong opinions on this. And I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole right now because we could talk about this for 3 hours. But I'm just noting like the technology is, if your criticism of this hinges on it's slop, it doesn't look good, it looks bad, that criticism is going, right. That's going to get washed away. You're pissing into the wind, right. The AI technology is getting good enough that these images are going to look like they already do look like a human artist drew them with this new technology, and it's just going to get better and better. If you do have an issue with it, focus on the ethics thing, because calling it visual slop, it just doesn't look like that anymore at all.
Yeah, I yeah, I want to have that discussion with David. Now is not the place for it. Please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, maybe even donate to us some money if you want to see us have that discussion, so we can like set aside time to just to talk about this in depth. It is a complicated discussion. I used ChatGPT the other night to tell a story to my kid at bedtime, and it was helpful. Right, it helped me brainstorm as I went, and I can't, like, the people who are against this don't see that back and forth, that they haven't experienced that back and forth conversation that you can really have with an AI to help you refine your ideas, when like you might not have the mental load to do all the creativity that you can do at like 10 in the morning, right? Now it's 10 o'clock at night and you need to be creative again. Here's a tool for you to use. It's a complicated subject, especially when like they've trained all of that AI on copywritten works. So we will deal with that over time. As you know, Dave, we've joked about it, right? We don't cover this over very much,
Yeah.
but it has been touching our work again and again and again, and in different ways.
It's difficult to disentangle, our industry from this, because once you do see this, and if you haven't seen this, just like look up 4.0 image generation Studio Ghibli, and you'll see some of the examples of people taking like famous real world photos and their own photos of themselves and their family and converting this. You can see where this goes in 5 years, right? You put on the headset and this is done in real time. Maybe it takes more than 5 years, but it seems like a rough time frame, right? Where you look around the world and your room is Studio Ghibli, and the world, you walk down the street and the world looks like you're in a Studio Ghibli movie, right? This is
Don't
apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation, by the way, but
I
like
don't
touching the ethics debate here with a 10-foot pole, because again, we could just talk about this for hours, right? And it would get very deep, and we have other things we want to shout at each other about.
Yeah, copyrighted, not copywritten. So I'm sorry for referring to that wrong. Even though like we do a lot of copywriting here around at UploadVR.com, that it's also copyrighted. Oh gosh, no. All right, let's move on to this next subject, and we will discuss this, and also that's the Black Mirror scenario David just suggested is here for us in a couple of years. If you're a person who only wants to be identified as your identity in VR, right? Like you literally don't want to go out in the real world. I I would like to speak with you. My email is ian@uploadvr.com. You can email tips@uploadvr.com. I'd like to understand if that person is out there, how they think and why they think that way about the representation of who they are in VR and why they do that. Um, yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, let's do a bridge piece of information first. We're going to talk about some data mining in Quest Horizon OS, and that refers to someone looking at the code inside the operating system that runs on your Quest headset to see what features are kind of slightly dormant or being referred to that aren't really implemented yet, that suggest that this is what Meta is going to do next. So one thing I should say when we're talking about the codec avatars is that there are already references to this in the Quest OS, right? These are months old. We talked about this last year. There are new references. There are even references now to a codec avatar's permission, where you give an app permission to use your codec avatar. So we do expect that like Meta is no longer in just the research phase for this. They are productizing this. And I think there is a very decent possibility that one of the flagship features of Quest 4 is codec avatars. And if not, a headset that maybe arrives a year after Quest 4 or something like that. It does seem like this is now a matter of like months, not years, for when we do see codec avatars launch. So I just want to note that in reference to our previous discussion. But now let's just discuss kind of the data mining that we're referring to today. And that is that there are references that have been discovered to screen sharing. So this is not the kind of screen sharing that already exists in Quest Horizon OS, which you may not know. You already can share your first-person view in Messenger and WhatsApp calls. You can do this on the Ray-Ban Meta glasses as well, but you can do it on Quest. You're in WhatsApp, you're in Messenger, you're in a video call. The other person will see your first-person view of what you're seeing through the pass-through cameras, including the virtual and mixed reality objects. So I guess when the feature that we just talked about launches, you'll also be able to flip the camera around to your avatar and then, flip the camera forward at any time to see the real world. But what we're talking about now is a different type of sharing. With this, you would be sharing a 2D window in your Quest home space with another person in a Quest. So this is through the system level calling where you're both meta avatars in your home space. If you didn't know that, you can invite people into your home already. But right now, you can't really do anything. Well, I say not anything because there's one app that does support this already through what seems to be a custom implementation, YouTube. You can actually, believe it or not, it's not really marketed much, watch YouTube videos together with someone else that owns a Quest headset in the home space. And we're not talking about other apps that can do this. Of course, there are other apps that do this sort of thing, but I'm talking about just in the home space built into the OS. Well, now there are data mining discovered by VR enthusiast Luna, who has discovered that this is being worked on as an OS level feature. So the same way that you have a little menu bar under your Quest windows now that let you like minimize and close and move them, a button that they may be adding according to this data mining is a share one. And when you have that share button on, anyone who's in your home space with you will see the same window. So you could probably use this for your web browser, for example. So that you're sharing the web browser, they see what you're seeing. Now, this is something that is a critical feature of visionOS. It is kind of built in as share play. And Ian loves to use it, I think, with James in the comments as well. And they can kind of share 2D windows. And I imagine Meta may have been inspired by this, and maybe Meta will argue they were working on it beforehand. But this is clearly something that is very important to the vision of VR that John Carmack outlined many years ago called Screens and People, where he argued that all you really need as a mainstream, what's the word I'm looking for here, a killer app for social VR and headsets in general is the ability to hang out with someone else on the other side of the planet and have any 2D screen that you can both see be seen by each other. And so the kind of caveat to that I imagine is going to be a real problem here is DRM. So I imagine that unless Meta has, come up with some big agreements with some big media companies, which seems unlikely to me, but I'd love to be proven wrong, that this isn't going to work for DRM content. So you bring up Netflix, and this is not going to work, I assume. And you bring up Disney Plus, and I doubt this will work. But it's still somewhat useful without those services, and even YouTube now is somewhat useful.
So, this is tricky. The same feature that we were talking about over there, I'm getting blurry here now, whether it was the previous subject or this subject, but the very same feature that lets you swap in an avatar as your front cam, or your back, your actual reality as the back cam, can easily send a video feed over your video chat to the person you're chatting with. I think this is pretty common actually in private video chats worldwide, where one of the callers on the chat is literally, they've swapped out their camera feed for a local video file that is now being broadcast over the video call.
Yeah, just a screen share, right?
Just via screen share. Yeah, a simple screen share. What I'm wondering is like, do we actually get, like, you've got MetaQuest HDMI link right now on the ecosystem, and to get that HDMI signal into your headset, it needs to come without DRM. So why wouldn't I be able to share whatever's on that MetaQuest HDMI app with whoever's with me in VR?
Well, I mean, it doesn't support DRM, right? Unless you get some very specific capture cards that we can question whether they're kind of technically legal, right? Like there are specific capture cards you can get from AliExpress and things like that that will do this. But if you go and buy a typical capture card off Amazon and you try to pipe in Netflix to your Quest, it won't work from my testing.
I mean, I've got PC restrictions, but like I'm discussing like if I've got. That's really tricky. So like I hate this legality. This minefield you're suggesting we're in. Okay, I want this. The situation is I've got like a laptop here, and I want to watch. I want to watch Netflix in my VR headset, and I want my partner sitting right next to me to have it time synced with them. I want them to watch on their screen in their preferred manner how
In a
to
headset.
watch the show, not in a headset. I want them to be in flat screen. What maybe they've got their phone here and they're reading a book,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I want to just have a shared background for us to be together. And I have to feel like I'm breaking the law to split an HDMI signal in order to get it into my headset and send it over here. And I don't buy
Sure.
that argument whatsoever. This is
Well,
the real functionality I need to make VR headsets more usable today.
sure. We need to do the is-ought distinction here, right? I'm not arguing what should be. I'm just letting you know how it is, right? Like, I think for most people, this kind of screen sharing in VR and mixed reality is useful at a distance, right? Not being in the same room as someone. Your use case of you're in a headset watching a movie and your partner beside you is on a flat screen watching the same movie at the same time, I think is remarkably niche. I don't think that's something that like any of these companies are really focusing on. I think like for most people, they're just going to watch it on a TV together, right? I'm not trying to criticize how you live, right? You do you. But what these companies are focusing on when they're building these experiences is letting you hang out with people that you can't be in the same room as. And that's still a problem, though, right? I absolutely think that it's critical for this industry that we figure this out so that you can watch Netflix together. And Apple, to its credit, with SharePlay, has done it on its own Apple TV service. Now, you do need and Disney Plus, but you do need to both be entitled to it. So, you need to either both own the movie, if I'm correct. Am I right about that? That if you to watch a movie together on Vision Pro and SharePlay, you need to both own the movie or
Yeah.
both be subscribed to the service.
Yes. Yes.
And what we
Yes.
want, and I think is critical, is that eventually these services need to not support that, because in reality, you can walk over to my house and sit on my couch and watch a movie with me on my TV, and Mr. Netflix and Mickey Mouse don't break through the window with a SWAT team and shoot you in the head, right? Like you can do it, right? Like that's something that nobody considers that illegal. It's not illegal for obvious reasons. So why can't I invite you to my virtual home and you sit here and you don't subscribe or own the movie, but I'm hosting it, and as long as I'm in the room, it's fine. Like that should be how it works eventually, right? Like.
Uh,
But maybe there's I think VR enthusiasts in this audience, let me know if you agree, would be willing to pay a little bit more. What if Netflix said you can add a $2 a month add-on, or Disney, and then we will let you do this in VR? Like, even if that needed to be the first step to eventually this becoming normal, you can't have it be this way. Like, imagine if you wanted to host a movie night on your TV and everyone had to come in and rent the movie individually, or the TV scanned the room and made sure, Mickey Mouse doesn't break through the window with the SWAT team. We agree on where they should go. I'm just saying I find it extremely unlikely that there is traction on this anytime soon.
All right. So, I mean, the commenters are going where I'm planning to go here. I bought Starship Troopers on Blu-ray disc, and I got it delivered here recently. And I put on the audio commentary that's audio track 2 on the disc, right? And I listened to the director of Starship Troopers tell all of the fans of Starship Troopers why and how they are idiots for not thinking that the film is denouncing fascism. And you listen to this glorious 2-hour stream of just delightful commentary from the people who made this piece of art. And to my knowledge, the only way I can officially go and get that particular audio stream for enjoying that particular movie is by getting the disc that it was recorded for back 15, 20 years ago. And that's the experience I want to share with James out there in our comments on our Apple Vision Pro. I want to say, hey James, you feel like watching this movie we both love with audio commentary? And it's like, yeah, I would. Who owns that audio commentary and gets it to me? Am I breaking the law to stream my Blu-ray disc to James 100 miles, 50 miles away from me on Staten Island, in New York? Am I breaking the law to now, I've broken the FBI warning at the beginning of the disc. Mickey Mouse is coming in he's rappelling into my home because I wanted to watch Starship Troopers and enjoy the commentary about fascism with James over there. You
It's a
get where
good
I'm
point.
going with this, right? Like I'm trying to get this existing media to play with someone who's far away as well as someone who's in the room with me both. Like I've used this example previously with many examples. My wife likes to watch Wicked or likes to watch TV with subtitles on. I don't, right? You can do that with a VR headset that's synced up to the physical screen. You can have a different presentation for two people sitting together. You can do that the same way that we go to theaters and have an accessibility mode that lets various people enjoy the movie with headphones on, with everyone else enjoying just the audio. Like, we've got that as an ability we can do. Please don't come for me, Mickey Mouse. I've got your folder full of Blu-ray discs right here. I've put all of the Disney things so that when they come in their RoboCop uniforms, I can pull my discs off the shelf and I can say, look, here they are, Mickey.
I don't know if you'll take an excuse. Yeah, but I agree with you. Like, it's one of the big kind of things that we lost in the move from physical media to streaming is those DVD extras. And I mean, I guess this isn't directly relevant to us, but it is in this context. That does mean that whenever this is implemented, even if streaming services do, you lose that. And I wonder, like, it seems like an obvious feature for these services to build out. Netflix hires it's like thousands of engineers somehow. I don't know what they all do, but you'd think like this would be an obvious feature for them to bring at some point and then eventually get brought
Yeah.
into this virtual world.
The audience has keyed in on the fact that I've never been to Staten Island, and honestly, James, I might never get out to Staten Island, to be honest. Like, I mean, it might as well be 150 miles or 1,000 miles away from me. You know how New York is. So I apologize. I apologize for my lack of geography about the New York area still. That's
So
how much time I'm spending in VR. So take my cred that way, okay?
So, yeah, one thing we should point out, as a commenter or two have pointed out, is that people in VR chat are hosting movie theaters where you do not have to pay. And yes, technically that is illegal. I don't think anyone's into, chasing that up yet because it's such small scale. But like a lot of things in VR chat that we've brought up before, 10x the user base that is doing this. And Mr. Mouse will be coming through your virtual windows and kind of with the SWAT team, right? Like there are, for example, there are people who really do get prosecuted in certain countries for this when it gets to a certain scale. And I'm not arguing for this. I'm not saying this is the world should be. I'm just saying this is how the world is. And unfortunately, that like a platform like Meta and Apple can't just take the VR approach, nor can they start marketing use your Quest to watch movies in VR chat for free, because again, as soon as you start to do that, then they get a $1 billion lawsuit from Mr. Disney himself.
Yeah, so Jack B, all the King's DRM horses and all the King's DRM men couldn't stop me from ripping my UHD Blu-rays and remastering them in 3D for VR again. If you didn't use AI for that poem, I credit you with a beautiful little poem there, Jack. That was delightful. All right, we ready to talk about the next story here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should just say that last thing is that there are other use cases for screen sharing other than watching movies. It could be something like working together, right? You're working on like a Google slide in the browser, like a presentation, a document. There's a bunch of different things. You're like studying together. I'm sure that we'll see, people do that, but it is the Achilles heel, and that's why we're keep harping on about this. Like, we want the ability to really hang out. Let's move on to the final section of our show. So again, this is the Valve section. We'll be discussing, firstly, my editorial, which was prompted by Half-Life Alyx's 5-year anniversary. And then we will discuss some data mining that suggests some possible specs of a variant of Valve's Deckard headset, their next headset. So I'll just get straight into this editorial. And as I've been hinting throughout the show, Ian strongly disagrees, so we're likely to get some lively discussion. Ian went as far to say that if I published this, it would not only not get bad feedback, but show that I just do not fundamentally understand Valve. And again, Ian is entitled to his opinion, and we're gonna discuss this. But I'll just really kind of outline what I said here. So this was prompted, as I said, by the 5-year anniversary of Half-Life Alyx, which is a really excellent game. And that's sort of the core source of my frustration here. Because Alyx arrived just under 9 months after the Valve Index, a $1,000 headset, as the first of the 3 full Valve VR games the company had teased before the headset's release. If you don't know what I mean by that, yes, it's true. Before Valve Index, about a year and a half or so ago, plus or minus 6 months, they said that there were 3 full Valve VR games in development, they being Gabe Newell himself. 3 full Valve VR games. So Alyx came along, and firstly, the Index came along, and a lot of people bought the Index on the understanding that Valve had given, which they'd publicly said, that we are building 3 full VR games. So Alyx comes along, incredible. Everyone's excited. Here's the first of these 3 VR games. The problem, of course, as we all know now in the year 2025, is that those other 2 VR games never materialized. In fact, in the 6 years now, almost, since Valve released the Index, it has released a total of 1 VR game and commissioned 2 15-minute demos, Aperture Hand Lab from Cloudhead Games and Moondust from Zach, the developer of Vertigo. So, in comparison, right, the irony here is that Valve doesn't really get flack about this for releasing a $1,000 headset, for promoting Steam VR as a platform, and then in 6 years launching 1 game and 2 demos. Meanwhile, the irony is that on this show every week and every year in the community, we all speculate and come up with our theories about how it's Meta that's about to pull out of VR gaming anytime now, any second, every year, without fail. Meta is just about to pull out and they don't care about VR gaming anymore. The irony, of course, being that since Alyx launched, Meta has fully funded Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, Lone Echo 2, Resident Evil 4 VR, Assassin's Creed Nexus, Asgard's Wrath 2, Batman Arkham Shadow, essentially a blockbuster VR title more than once a year, as well as funded dozens and hundreds of indie titles that are sometimes exclusive, sometimes partially, sometimes not even. And so I'm just kind of wondering, like, first, what is that kind of expectational hypocrisy where one company is releasing more than a blockbuster VR game a year and is constantly accused of not caring about gaming or withdrawing, while the other releases one excellent, fantastic game. Truly, a lot of people say it's the best VR game of all time. We can debate that, but you would at least admit that it is in like the top, right? The very top list. And so I'm just kind of wondering, what does the timeline look like in the alternate universe where Valve did the same? What would it look like? What would PC VR's growth look like if Valve was releasing a blockbuster game even once every 2 years, right? Even a quarter of the pace of Meta. Can we imagine a timeline where Valve leveraged its IPs like Counter-Strike, Portal, Left 4 Dead, Team Fortress, and Dota to release blockbuster Steam VR titles? Is it really too much to ask that the one company that's making serious profit from PC VR invests in its future? And then in this editorial, I argued against the 3 counter arguments to this that I see being the main ones. I'm not looking at the comments yet. I'll get into it. Maybe I address this. So the biggest counter I see is that's just not Valve's style. Like it's a company that they're not kind of geared up to release constant titles. It would change their whole culture. And you know what? Maybe you're right. But in that case, they could fund other developers, right? So that 15-minute demo from Cloudhead Games, Aperture Hand Lab, is Valve commissioning Cloudhead Games, the developer of Pistol Whip and The Gallery, to build a 15-minute Portal-themed demo. Why not a 15-hour Portal-themed game? Cloudhead Games has the chops. They've been around in this industry for a very long time. They've said multiple times, like, we hope someone comes and gives us the money to make a AAA game. We think we have the experience in VR now. And then the next argument is Valve just doesn't want to artificially inflate the market. Meta's games are kind of too high budget so that they make it difficult for the market to kind of naturally grow and other developers to build the same kind of stuff. In that case, I would argue back, why release Alex in the first place? Alex is a perfect example of a distortion of the PC market, to the point where this day, everyone said when a new VR game comes out, a lot of the criticisms are, but it's not as good as Alex. It's not Alex. I want more Half-Life Alexes. So Valve did that. And then why tease the other two games? The other two of the three games. If you didn't want to artificially inflate the market, why ever have that strategy in the first place? It seems that that's not the reason from my perspective. The last kind of criticism I see is, but Valve is a much smaller company than Meta. And it's true that Valve isn't Meta scale, but it's not as small as sometimes people make it out as. Valve is estimated to bring in 10 billion revenue every year, and Gabe Newell, the CEO, reportedly owns an armada of luxury super yachts, and we link to the reports about that in our article. Now, Valve has not been an indie darling for decades now. It can afford to invest in PC VR. Now, Gabe Newell can spend his money however he likes. I'm not here to tell Gabe Newell that he has to spend his money a certain way. However, I do think that if we're calling as an industry for greater investment in VR gaming, and we're also calling for PC VR to grow and for someone to grow PC VR, we shouldn't be expecting that Meta is the one to do this and start, putting money into PC VR. It should be the company that owns Steam that's making the 30% cut, that's actually making profit in PC VR. It should be Valve. And that's kind of my argument. And now it is Ian's turn to rip it apart.
Oh, yeah. Goodness. Many places I can take this. I'm going to focus on when I felt catered to as a VR enthusiast. And this is a funny thing for me to say, because I've never called myself a VR enthusiast. I don't like the term. Because it feels like you've only got to be enthusiastic about this technology if you come up with that label, when like very bad things are going to happen because of VR too. And so I never want to use that. But let's say, for the case of argument here, that I am a VR enthusiast and I want to put on a headset as someone who just enjoys spending time in the places I go inside of a headset, right? I felt cared for as a VR enthusiast. I felt like the hardware had been manufactured by people who were like me in wanting to spend hours inside of virtual reality. I felt that with the Oculus Rift. I felt it with the HTC Vive. I felt it with the Valve Index. And I felt it with the Bigscreen Beyond 2. I've never felt catered to as a VR enthusiast in almost any other hardware. I've always felt like other hardware was also ran solutions trying to test out A/B testing on a different product. I felt like those products were designed by people who said, I want to take someone to a place and have them have a really great experience for a couple hours. And the source of my core criticism of your editorial here, that you don't understand Valve, and I don't think you necessarily understand the VR market that Valve owns on PC. Valve owns PC VR after a decade. Still, it hasn't had to do anything to own PC VR.
Sure, but here's what it owns. It owns the slowest growing segment in VR that is growing at a glacial pace. It owns nothing, right? It owns something that
100% of the time it works. 90% of the time, like I'm remembering the Anchorman quote or whatever it is. That's 100% of Valve revenue. What I'm pointing is, would two more games might have moved this from here to here, is I think what Gabe Newell would have responded to with like that's not going to move this from 3% to 10%. What will move this from 3% to 10% is, I don't know, parity with the Steam Deck library.
I mean, what do you mean by parity with the Steam Deck library? You can play every Steam game on a virtual screen through Steam Theater View already, right?
I want to play every Steam Deck game on my VR headset with one-to-one controls of a Steam Deck.
You can use your Steam Deck and use Steam Link.
I want to be here playing my game with the controls maybe under the covers if I could, and then I want to switch to an actual job simulator for a few minutes, right, or whatever, and just mess
I don't.
around from the
I mean,
air, and then go back to my Steam Deck game.
I get what you're
That's
saying. Like that doesn't shift things either. I mean, I really do think that like people buy these hardware. PC gamers are going to buy a hardware when there's games, and a lot of people bought for Alex, right? You can see this tick here for Alex. It's one of the biggest jumps that's consistently seen is right here. If you take this jump off, by the way, this is almost no growth. This line goes flat if you take away the Alex growth. That's something that's really interesting. And I think if people saw that Valve, it's not just that those two games existed, it's that Valve's committed to it, right? If you saw like a Portal game, a Counter-Strike game, Dota, whatever, every few years, then people go, wow, this is a market Valve cares about. They're going to release content. I'm going to buy a headset to play these three games, and then whatever Valve comes out with the year after. And again, they don't have to do it themselves. They can commission it, right? Like they did this for Cloudhead Games. They built a 15-minute Portal demo. I don't see any reason why Cloudhead, like my understanding, I don't want to speak for Cloudhead, but my understanding is they were fully willing to make that into a full game had someone given them the money.
Oh, sure. I get it. I'm just not convinced that like the bang for your buck is there. Like you've got the head of Boneworks, Bone Lab, Stress Level Zero, Brandon out there giving us the math on just how they can't produce a AAA production quality game. The budgets have to be a certain size for the market. What I'm like, they released Half-Life Alyx as a way to update the Steam Workshop to incorporate community-made maps, and there's a whole bunch of community-made content that you can enjoy inside of Half-Life Alyx. How would two more VR titles of the last 2 years have improved the Steam Workshop functionality
That's
so that
not.
you can pull together all the assets inside of Half-Life Alyx and rebuild your own game with them?
Right, but that's not why they released Alex, and it's not what most people do in Alex. If you look at those Steam Workshop numbers, like that's some people doing it. Like people are buying it to play the game, right? They want to play a really high quality, dozen plus hour narrative VR game that's cleverly made, right? And so I see one comment here going that like PC VR users are not just going to eat Quest cake and stop asking for PC VR content. And I fully agree. They want more PC VR content, but the company you should be asking it for is the company that owns Steam. Like, why would anyone else do it when they're not the ones that make the money off the platform? It's just like if any other company had this lack of level of investment in a new category, right? If look at the criticism that Sony gets for only releasing a couple of blockbuster titles for PlayStation VR 2. Look at the criticism. Imagine the criticism that Nintendo would have got if they released the Switch with like one Zelda game and then never used any of the other IPs again, right? Like it just seems like such a double standard. And I do genuinely think that if Valve was committed to releasing content for Steam VR, you would see this number tick up because that would interest PC gamers more than anything.
What if this marker is just the scale that it takes to keep VR open?
I don't think you can have both, right? Why can't you have an open platform that the platform holder also releases big games for?
It's not, I
mean, they did in the first years of Steam, right? Think of all these games that we're talking about. They were all released in many ways for Steam, right? Like the original Half-Life 2 was the bundle. Like there was a controversy back then, which you can't even compute in this reality of 2025. People were annoyed that you needed Steam to play the Half-Life 2, right? And then all of these other games came out on PC only on Steam. So like they did it, and this was a huge reason that Steam grew and became this, right? The fact that ironically, again, it was a Half-Life game, but then it was followed up, right? It was Team Fortress, it was Counter-Strike, it was Portal. All these games, you went to Steam. You didn't go and buy them from like traditional outlets. You bought them from Steam.
Where I'm going, I don't think we disagree. Even though our audience like knows we disagree, we don't disagree. What I think maybe I disagree with you on is that Valve has owned PC VR for more than a decade. And I hate to say owned because you can go and homebrew your PC games and package them outside of the Steam ecosystem. You can go and release them on Epic Game Store and on the Rift Store or Games GOG. You can go and do all of that. Like, that's still available to you. But Valve hasn't had to do anything to to decrease their monopoly in PC VR gaming, agree on the OpenXR standard with Meta and a whole bunch of others. It's like they're getting all of the benefits of advancement in hardware that's happening around their ecosystem, the Steam VR trackers, the full body tracking, everything that people are doing in VR chat, all the best things, Steam Flight Simulator 2025, all the best things you do in VR still happen on Steam, and it isn't helped by like, all that you can do is spend more time on those games or better ideas than those games,
Well,
right? Like, you've just got more time to keep working on polish.
you're saying that like they're getting up the benefits of like the Steam VR tracking and all these things. Let's be real, they're getting the benefits of cheap wireless Quest headsets connecting to Steam, which is this, right? Like the majority of Steam VR usage today, 2/3 is people using these Meta headsets. And like, had that not happened, if it wasn't possible to buy a $300 headset from Meta and connect to Steam VR in 2 clicks, this would be Steam, right? Steam VR, right? And it likely would be contracting. So I don't think like it's despite Valve that PC VR has managed to grow because you can join from these wireless Quest headsets. Like it's this, that's what I'm trying to say. Like Valve didn't go and build an open computer vision system for any company to make, right? Like a headset for cheap that connects to PC. They didn't do these things. They didn't build, the 3D, turn any PC game into 3D. Modders did, great. I mean, the fundamental part of my argument is just that like the company that's pushing the platform should maybe invest in it a little bit. I don't think it's actually that controversial.
No, I think I get it. Like, you could throw a pittance at getting a whole bunch of devs to get a project. You could employ probably, I don't know, 200 devs with I don't know, what would be 200 dev salaries for 2 years? Someone out there give me the dollar amount on it. 40 million, I don't know, something, some multiple millions of dollars. It's going to be a lot of money, but it's still like, why hasn't that fund existed, and why hasn't it produced a whole bunch of games to help push this up? I get that. That's not, you're right. It's not controversial. I think I'm just arguing something much broader and bigger that Valve has been like the defender of. And that's the openness and independence of VR as a separate, cool thing that doesn't need augmented reality or mixed reality to function. It's still a place you go to without any of your physical reality, and they've made sure it's open for a decade.
Sure, okay, I understand that, but I don't think these things are mutually exclusive, and I don't think it's anything to do with mixed reality. The Index has pass-through. The HTC Vive had pass-through when the Oculus Rift didn't, right? So they were first. I don't, like, these just seem like completely separate things. You can have an open ecosystem where the platform holder still invests in games and in companies and in startups, right?
That's where we start. That's when we start getting the pitchforks. Pitchforks? I'm sorry, I said that. The pitchforks, where we start arguing who is truly more open here and who is truly more closed, and that's when David and end up in a slap fight, and we fight each other off screen as we decide who is more open. Is it really open to go and log into your Facebook account in order to get onto your Quest headset?
You don't need a
No. Is it really open to log into your Steam account?
Facebook account for Quest for 3 years.
And is it really open to go have to log into your Steam account in order to enjoy your library of PC games? Doesn't feel great, does it? It doesn't feel great to have to sign in order to enjoy your property. They're
both platforms, right? They're both stores that sell you digital content. I don't you could argue that if we're talking about the stores, they're no more or less open now than each other. Like, look at the slop on the Horizon store, right? Like, that's what you get with openness. It's the disadvantage. I'm not saying there's no advantage, but like, I don't think if you're a developer that wants to release something on the Meta, Quest, Horizon store, or Steam, you're going to experience either of these options as being more or less open, other than maybe some like minor technical differences around the margin, right? Like, I don't think that Valve is the one that makes PC gaming open. I think it's just the nature of the PC. I don't think like Valve didn't invent the architecture of PCs. They didn't, they make their own OS, but most of the people are on Windows, right? You could argue it's Microsoft's decisions in the 90s that
All right.
make the software stack of PC so open. They could have, in
So,
theory, built an OS that's a lot more closed, and they didn't, right?
so there's a laptop company out there called Framework, started by who, David?
A former Oculus engineer called, it starts with an N, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now, but yeah, so there's a company out there. You can go get a Linux running laptop. You can go install Windows on that laptop. You can get different configurations, and they've basically componentized the laptop, so you can swap out the various components of a laptop. I want one of these Framework laptops with a serious graphics card in it, with no screen on top. I want to plug in a screen if I ever want to use it, and I want it to be an HMD or a physical one. But I want just the bottom half of this Framework laptop. And here's where I'm going with this. It's like, again, I want to install SteamOS on that laptop. And Valve has spent the last 10 years getting ready for me to do so. And so I'm going, are we not, what are we not getting on the same page about that Steam is functioning to make its platform bigger? There's maybe where there was 500,000 people who were in this 3% a couple of years ago. Maybe there's 1 million people in this 3% now, because Steam has grown the overall share of people who are using Steam through things like Steam Deck and through things like SteamOS.
Well,
and all of it
those aren't
like
growing it, though. Those are around the margins, right? Like 90-something% of Steam is on Windows. Like, and Steam Deck sold a couple of million units at most compared to the 150 million people on Steam. Like, these are interesting stuff, and it's certainly Valve diversifying, but like on the grand scheme of things, it's like Reality Labs for Meta right now, right? Like you can argue whether it pays off in future, but right now, Valve makes 99% of it, probably 99% of its revenue from the 30% cut it gets on selling games to people on Windows PCs, and Meta makes 98 or whatever, 99 on advertising on Facebook and Instagram and etc. Right? Like, sure, you can say that this is a diversification. You can talk about SteamOS, but that's not what the majority of people are using. And when it comes to VR, even less, right? Like almost none of the big VR games even support Linux. It's probably above 99% of Steam VR users that are on Windows. And again, this is just like Valve hasn't had to do anything. They just sit there and take the money. And the only reason that they are the one that's selling this is
bullshit that they haven't done anything. To SteamOS is something that affects this. To describe it as on the margins is underplaying, marginally widening the funnel of users has huge effects 3 years down when you marginally open up the market to 2 million people who are only ever going to get a gamepad form factor, right? Or like a handheld form factor, right? Marginal improvements end up having major effects that snowball on a Valve time scale that no one in this audience appreciates, right? Like there's I'm not talking to the silent people who are going to wait until Half-Life 3 and they're going to enjoy it when Half-Life 3 comes out. That's the scale of progress that Valve is on for VR.
Sure, I just think like SteamOS came out 10 years ago. This isn't like we haven't seen a shift. That there's been this expectation from Linux enthusiasts that it's a meme now, right? This is the year of the Linux desktop, and Windows hasn't budged, right? It hasn't budged. Look at the Steam hardware survey. All of these VR gamers, maybe it pays off, and maybe they move into different form factors. Maybe they do a console kind of thing that's a consoleized PC, and maybe we'll talk about Deckard in a second. It's running SteamOS, but yeah, we'll have to see. I just think a lot of these, what I'm seeing here is I'm pointing out something, and you're bringing up things that are interesting stuff from Valve, but just really don't have relevance to the key point of like PC VR's growth over the past 5 years. Like frankly, most of it is just like completely separate stuff. And I think it's interesting.
Is Proton separate?
It may be interesting once you run Windows applications on a VR headset. it's really interesting for what they've pulled off with Steam Deck. It's remarkable. Proton is a really cool investment. But again, like it's not for the actual vast majority of the PC gaming market, it's not changing that much right now. Maybe that changes when SteamOS goes on other handhelds.
So TMS, and we've lost our audience on this subject. We've got one more subject to get through today, and I'm just going to leave it on this. If you haven't gone into desktop mode on SteamOS and then gone into the Discover tab and installed some packages from the Discover area of SteamOS, you haven't experienced Linux with the ease of use of Android and the ease of use of iOS. You haven't experienced Linux with the ease of use of a mobile phone, right? And that's what they've been building. That is an amazingly cool path to installing open source packages on the internet. And like, you've all been burned by 30 years of Linux being rebranded as something else. But like, I'm not convinced that necessarily needs to be the case going forward. We could genuinely use Linux more often with how robust the platform is, how the improvements that I just discussed, right? An app store that you just go install the packages on, and you uninstall them later if you want to get rid of them. That's taken decades for Apple and Microsoft to roll out on their platforms. And now like it's available on that particular brand of Linux.
Yeah, I mean, look, as Headset Historian is pointing out, they've been using Ubuntu daily, and that ease of use has been there. I've used Linux. I have a laptop that's running Linux. I don't think like the ease of use problem has been solved for quite a while. There are just a bunch of other reasons that are individually minor, but all sum up. And I guess we'll just have to see, right? Keep looking at the Steam hardware survey. Let's see when Linux changes from being anything other than like 3 or 4%. And let's
Yep. Fair.
I guess we can only we'll have a look and see how that changes over time. I mean, if you like, there was a lot of reporting a decade ago that Gabe Newell's investment in Linux and its SteamOS was worrying that Microsoft was going to turn Windows into a consoleized operating system where you could only install programs from the Microsoft Store. And that didn't pan out. It turned out to either Microsoft secretly planned it and changed their mind, or it was just paranoia on Gabe's account. You would want to be paranoid, right? If your entire revenue, if 90% of your revenue, 95 or 99 probably actually, comes from selling software to Windows users on an app store that you've installed on Windows, then you would obviously be concerned about that. And it makes sense to hedge into SteamOS. And maybe that hedge has some other advantages, but like I wonder how much of it was just a hedge.
Yeah, I appreciate David and I aren't really disagreeing. I'm in agreement. His editorial did make sense. There was like, right, it got published. It's a good editorial. Everyone in our audience is nodding along. It said something that needed to be said. I think there's this other perspective to bring on of like, let me flip it around on you, right? If we credit Meta with its $100 billion of investment in VR and AR technology as like moving VR forward, can we not also flip this around on Valve and respect them for keeping PC VR open and active with a fraction of that investment, right? Like
open, yes, active, no.
I don't. All the modders are out there doing their thing, and they're doing it in larger numbers than they did in 2016.
But Valve isn't like, they're not doing it on SteamOS. They're doing it on Windows. They're doing it because Microsoft's operating system allows applications to talk to each other and allows you to go in and use custom DLLs and decompile stuff fairly easily and change files. Like that's the modding that's available on PC for the majority of users exists because Windows is a relatively open operating system. It's not open source, but like you can do a lot on Windows. Oh, I think we've lost Ian.
I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah, so let's have a look at some of the comments here. Some very interesting stuff here. We got some people on each side giving their arguments. Some Linux users here chiming in. Some SteamOS users chiming in. Gigo, the developer of Virtual Desktop, saying Linux users are the most vocal, but in the end account for such a small percentage of users and a huge support nightmare, not worth it. I've heard that from other developers. yeah, it's so kind of fragmented that it's difficult to support for it there. And Big Bomb saying 99% of PC gamers on Steam use Windows, but 100% of Deck users use Linux. Not 100%. You can install Windows on Steam Deck. And also, I'm just pointing out, like, Steam Deck is only a couple of million people, right? Like, there are more Quest headsets out there than Steam Decks. That's something that the mainstream gaming and tech media, like, if you just listen to them, it wouldn't be intuitive to you. But that is an actual fact. Like, there are probably 10 times as many Quest headsets out there as there are Steam Decks.
Yeah, what my conflict was, I was multitasking from my Mac, and I had 3 multitasking windows, and I noticed they added the word early access to the 3 multitasking windows in the little corner that wasn't there initially. And I had 3 of those windows from a Mac Virtual Display. And for at least the last hour of our show, those 3 multitasking windows were frozen in space. And I've just been trying to like muddle through it with you, David, while half of my performance has been trying to draw these 3 windows, and like by the time of just a minute ago I bugged out completely. So that was something that would not have happened if I was multitasking in SteamOS. All right, let's fight.
No, I think we're ready to move on to the next topic, which I don't think will be too much of a fight. I think we're gonna have pretty similar opinions on this, so maybe not. We don't really know.
Let's get into this one, and I think I got to drop off of here at the top of the hour for a hard stop. So let's move through this.
Okay, let's go pretty damn quickly then. Okay, so we're first, for context, this image on screen is just an old Valve design patent from years ago. It doesn't indicate what Deckard is actually going to look like. It's just useful to see the kind of things Valve explored. That's the caveat here before people start talking about the design. But the actual interesting stuff here is that we have data mining of the Steam VR code that reveals what one proof of concept of Valve Deckard that could be years old, it could be relatively recent, but it also could be multiple years old, had in terms of its screen specs, its chipset, and its cameras. So just for context here, if you don't know what Deckard is, if you don't know anything, for the past 4 years, Valve has repeatedly publicly confirmed that it is working on a new headset. That is not speculation. Valve has said it over and over. It is strongly hinted that it will have a focus on wireless streaming from your PC, while also having some standalone capabilities. A Valve job listing mentioned it having inside-out tracking, camera pass-through, environment understanding, eye tracking, and hand tracking. And in this time, many references to a new Valve headset called Deckard have been found in the code of Steam VR by people such as VR enthusiast Brad Lynch's Discord data mining group. So what's new? Lynch's data mining group have discovered a reference to 7 pre-production models of Deckard in Steam VR code. POC-A, POC-C, POC-D, Mini-D, POC-E, POC-F, EV1, and EV2. POC stands for proof of concept. EV stands for engineering validation. It's unclear what Mini-D means. So Deckard POC-A, proof of concept A, and C were first discovered in the Steam VR code almost 4 years ago, Mini-D almost 3 years ago, and EV2 a few weeks ago. But we don't know how old POC that we're talking about here, POC-F, is. But what's more notable than just its name is that they've discovered code revealing the specific display panels, tracking cameras, and Qualcomm chipset, not AMD, that is used in Deckard POC-F. So we're talking about one proof of concept of Valve Deckard. Deckard POC-F, this code reveals, used 2 2160 by 2160 LCD panels with 120 hertz refresh rate, had 4 world-facing tracking cameras, 2 internal eye tracking cameras, and was powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset. So that resolution is roughly equivalent to Quest 3. These are 2K LCD panels and significantly lower than Apple Vision Pro's 3660 by 3200. It's also not micro OLED. So these are LCD panels of roughly the same resolution as Quest 3. As for the tracking cameras, this would be a similar setup, right? 4 tracking cameras. And we saw, obviously, back in December or November, those ROI models leak in Steam VR that suggest that these are tracked in the same way as Quest 3's Touch Plus controllers and as Pico 4 Ultra controllers. So headset cameras tracking the controllers. The chipset is more interesting. Firstly, the fact that they're using a Qualcomm Snapdragon chipset at all, because these are the same kind of chipsets used in Quest headsets, in Pico headsets. These are variants of the kind of chipsets that go into high-end Android phones. The difference being that they have cooling fans in the headsets to have better performance than in phones. So this Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, Quest 3's chipset is based on Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and it's called in Quest XR2 Gen 2. Based on, I say, because it is quite different on the CPU side, but the GPU is the same. So 8 Gen 3 is the chip that came out the year after the Quest 3's chip. And so it has a new GPU that has 25% faster performance and 25% improved efficiency. So that's only a small leap forward, but it is a leap. So this is super interesting because this suggests that based on this architecture, Valve Deckard is going to be a lot more like a Quest than some people had speculated. There was some speculation that Deckard might use an AMD chip like you would see in a Steam Deck or a PlayStation 5 or Xbox console that would use like a PC like x86 architecture instead of ARM. But Snapdragon chips are very much so ARM. So let's just again note that a proof of concept that could be years old having something does not mean that the shipping Deckard will have it. However, if this proof of concept is reflective of the shipping Deckard, it would essentially be on a hardware level a slightly faster Quest 3 with eye tracking, like on a fundamental specs issue. Now, this to me doesn't match up to the rumor that we saw last month that Valve Deckard is set to release for $1,200. That doesn't make sense. Like just adding a slightly faster chip and eye tracking to a Quest 3 like design, even if you do like have a nice rear battery and all that, that's not getting you to $1,200. So this suggests one of two things to me. Well, three things, I guess. One would be that this is just a proof of concept, and that the real Deckard will have, much better specs on the display side, such as micro OLED displays, maybe even just very, very high-end LCDs that are like 3K with mini LED, backlighting, something like that. Possibility two is that the $1,200 includes either a Steam Deck or a Steam Blade, like a consoleized PC that goes under your TV, and that's a full package. So you, as someone who doesn't own a PC, can get a headset, the Deckard, with a wireless console thing that's like can play your Steam games on your TV or power your headset, and that's $1,200 is the full package. Possibility three, there will be multiple tiers of Deckard. We haven't really ever suggested why could there only be one Deckard. What about a Deckard and a Deckard Pro? Maybe the Deckard is closer to Quest 3's specs, just with eye tracking, and it's 600, 700, whatever. And then the full Deckard Pro, is micro OLED and $1,200. That's another thing. There's so many possibilities here, but I want to really highlight, don't draw big conclusions from this, because this is only what a proof of concept model had.
So Geek Odin out there in the comments, the creator of Virtual Desktop, saying, curious whether it runs Android or Linux. I think that is the question of the day. The amount of work that will be involved in porting work to this device from existing devices. We even had that little moment earlier in the show where David imagined, what if the computer vision could identify the location of the lighthouse space stations automatically for you? I was imagining a more manual setup process. I'm going to have to get going here. I want to say thank you to the commenters. I'll let David sort of close off the show here. I want to say thank you to the donations from Parmesan here near the end, as well as Longshot giving us some money there in support. Please become a member at UploadVR.com. Thank you so much for the interesting discussion today. Yeah, I'm sorry to bounce out on you, David, here, but we went long here and I need to get going. But just want to say thank you to you all. Thank you to the incredible work of David, keeping up with the news. And I appreciated our heated discussion, even though I don't think we're really disagreeing on the larger points of everything we talk about. We'll see you on the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of our audience enjoyed that. I mean, I'll just keep closing out here with some comments here as you go off. And yes, thank you to Longshot and Parmesan for your donations. I'm just scrolling down the chat now. Seeing Parmesan is super late and just made it. So you may not even see this if you're in the past. This is a topic that I'm seeing a lot of comments on. Wow. So let's dig into some of these comments just before we built out. Okay. So Shall Alaska saying, isn't Quest 3 LCD? It doesn't matter if it's OLED. Yes, Quest 3 is LCD. Every Quest since Quest 1 has been LCD. And the problem with LCD is while it's sharp and you get that nice kind of, I mean, look, the problem with LCD is while it's cheap, is what I should really say. It doesn't have the contrast and the punchiness and the true blacks of OLED. And like, if you did use VR in the OLED only era of Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, or you did use the Quest 1, or you maybe use the Samsung Odyssey, there is actually a real step back in some really key ways to go to LCD. Like, it just feels washed out and not as rich of a virtual image. And I understand why they did it, because regular OLED, it's very, very difficult to get it in VR spec with full 3 subpixels RGB. It's usually this pentile thing that has like only 2/3 the number of subpixels, and it either is got a big screen door effect where you have to kind of blur that out on purpose, and then it's blurry. And then micro OLED is the ideal display system for VR, but it's expensive as hell. You can't do a Quest headset at these sort of prices with micro OLED. So that is the difficulty here. And a lot of people had expected that Valve would kind of go for micro OLED because, as we were just pointing out in that previous discussion, right? If you want a $300 to $500 headset that's got LCD panels that can wirelessly connect to Steam VR, Meta already makes it. It's called the Quest. So people thought Valve was maybe going to go for the premium aspect, and it still could. Again, it still could. This is only a proof of concept here. This could be something that is very different from the Deckard that actually gets shipped by Valve. I think the interesting question about what operating system this runs on is interesting for sure. So that actually kind of comes back to some of this discussions Ian had about Valve's long-term investments in this platform. So this could, for example, SteamOS could run on an ARM processor. There's no reason it couldn't, right? And then they could do what they're doing already with Steam Deck is they're translating kind of Windows to Linux using this Proton compatibility layer. Well, what if they go one step further and you're translating x86 stuff to ARM? We've seen this done on Mac, right? Like that's how they run legacy software on the new Apple Silicon Macs. We've seen Microsoft try to do this a bunch of times when they try to move Windows over to ARM chips, and they're still kind of doing it. So a big problem has always been performance there, right? As James O'Loughlin points out, Rosetta on Mac and Prism on Windows ARM does it, but could you do that while maintaining VR performance? That's a tough challenge that I'm kind of really skeptical about. So, one thing I really want to highlight here when we talk about Deckard and we talk about this using a Quest chip is, I'm just going to say this out loud. I think the fantasy that some people have, that Deckard is going to be PC VR fidelity without a PC, is a fantasy. Like, it is not going to happen in my view. I would love to be wrong about that, because that would change our industry. If you could get a standalone headset without a PC, without the big 500-watt box in the corner that has these giant fans drawing in and pushing out air and whirring at really loud volume, and it's 5 kilograms. If you didn't need that, then that changes the industry, right? Of course that changes the industry. That's the magic that we all want. If we could wish what we want out of existence, then standalone PC VR is what we would all want. The problem is that, like, it's not clear that that's possible. In fact, it seems very, very unlikely that it's possible. If you have a headset that's on your head, you have to draw battery power, right? And maybe that battery is an external battery, and then you can kind of double the size of it compared to being in the headset or on the back. But it's still nothing compared to what your PC is drawing from the wall, right? Your gaming PC is drawing 0.5 kilowatt, and that's only the energy. Then talk about the thermals. Look at the size of your graphics cards. Look at the size of those fans. Look at all of what you have in your PC. Look at the architecture of a console. Take a PlayStation or Xbox apart. It's a giant cooling system. That's what these things are. They are pulling in hundreds of watts, generating a bunch of heat and pushing it out. How do you do that in your head? Like, it's not clear that that's possible at all. Like, you put it on the back of the head, sure, but like, you still are limited by size there. You're still going to get, like, unless you have a really perfect heating system, you're going to start heating up the back of your head. Like, these standalone headsets already do a lot of thermal work to like push the heat out of the sides of the headset that even just a mobile chipset is generating. And these are like, 5 to 15 watt. On Apple Vision Pro, maybe it goes up to like 20 or 30 at absolute max. How do you get to like PCVR fidelity, which is hundreds of watts on your head? It just like, Hussein is saying in the comment, just the GPU alone is the size of Quest 3. So I suspect that the focus of Valve Deckard will be on being a wireless PC headset. You will still need your PC to play Half-Life Alyx that looks like the Half-Life Alyx that we all know and love. Maybe Valve ports a version, right? They create a new sticker on Steam games optimized for Deckard, right? And they run natively on the headset, but it's an ultra low graphics setting that gets applied. And, games have to get updated with this ultra low graphics settings, which is pretty much like what you're doing when you're porting to Quest, except without the OS architecture change, right? You're not changing it from like PC to Android. You're just building something that still runs on Linux, right? If your VR game already supports Linux, but it's at a lot lower graphics. Like even when people say like sometimes, oh well, handhelds are a thing now, right? Go and watch what happens when people try to run Half-Life Alyx on the Steam Deck and like in VR and put through a cable to the headset. It is possible to do, right? When you're on Windows. I think some people have even finished it out on Linux, but like they're on the lowest graphics settings at resolution that is so low that it's difficult to like decipher things in the distance, and it's at like 20 to 40 frames per second. So, sure, you add eye tracked foveated rendering, you're going to get a little bit of a boost. Sure, you get the newer chips and they're going to be a little bit better, but like I don't see where you square the circle here to get this to like now it's running, Half-Life Alyx at like 90 or 120 frames per second at a decent resolution that isn't like comically low. Like, and then obviously the next one is that people say, well, what about a compute puck, right? Like, well, that's what a PlayStation is for PlayStation VR 2. Like, that's what that is. It's like, look at the size of that. Look at the graphics you get on PlayStation VR 2. If you want even that, which PC, top PC VR gamers with 5090s are going to scoff at. If you want even that, look at the thermal architecture of that thing. Look at how many watts that's drawing from the wall. This is all just like physics and engineering getting in the way. I would love to be wrong about all this, by the way. I really would. Again, it would be the biggest game changer in the world. If Valve could somehow magically come up with a headset that you put on your head and you can launch Skyrim VR and the PC version of Behemoth and the PC version of Metro Awakening and Alien Isolation, and it just works and it's even $1,200, like that changes the entire industry forever. But I just think like you're setting yourself up for deep disappointment if you think that is possible. Yeah, like even like Apple makes the most efficient and in many ways on the CPU highest performance mobile chips, and as David Bigelow is pointing out, like Vision Pro is about a third as powerful as a PlayStation 5, right? So, and they use eye tracked foveated rendering. Like, go and play some VR games that run natively on Vision Pro. That's not PC VR quality. Like, sure, when you're doing in those home environments, they're using, photogrammetry in a very clever way to get a visual experience that looks really, really great. But these are static in non-interactable environments that are designed to be viewed from like one kind of perspective. Maybe you move like on a room scale at most. This isn't like a virtual world that you can freely explore. There's no interactivity here. There's no gameplay logic. It's kind of like very, very different. Now, what we did see, some commenters here being like, I just want it to be wireless with a wired option as well. That's something that we expect Valve is going to optimize around, right? We've seen, we discussed it either last week or the week before, that they're working on a Steam VR link dongle that you would be able to plug into your PC and not have to worry about your wireless router and just be able to run wireless PC VR to your Deckard without having to worry about like networking issues. That's something that I think will be a real focus for this. Like, I have some people saying that they think it can be done with a compute puck. Again, it's like, that's your PC, right? Like, your PC is a compute puck. It's just really big and powerful, right? If you mean by a puck something that fits in your pocket, the thermals of that just like that's not going to work. Your pocket is going to heat up. There's not enough space to push air out there. It's not even big enough. If you mean by a compute puck something that sits on the desk in front of you and it's like a small form factor PC, maybe, yeah. But like, you're going to find that when you actually build that it looks a lot like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series S or X, right? And like, people are pointing out the Mac Mini. Like, look at the Mac Mini. It's not really a puck. It's small and impressively small. Even then, it's not powerful enough to run PC VR, and like, it's drawing a lot more than a battery. Have you tried to run your gaming PC off the kind of battery you could fit in your pocket? Someone do the math in the comments, but you're talking minutes, like maybe, if even. It would just be a very short experience. Yeah, so let's have a look at some of the comments here. Yeah, so I do think that it is very possible that Valve does make a consoleized PC. You know, like, we've seen rumors about this for a very long time now. It's something that they were exploring all the way back in the Steam machines date, but the problem with the Steam machines is that they were made by other companies, and so they had to make a profit. And the difference with Steam Deck is that because Valve makes it, and they are, as I keep pointing out to Ian, the one that makes the money on PC by owning the store, they're able to sell that at a cost or loss. Like, Gabe Newell has said, like, that Steam Deck's pricing was painful for him. And to me, that strongly suggests that they're selling that thing at a small loss. Ironically, the same thing Meta's doing with their Quest headset, right? Like, people go, oh, Meta's flooding the market with low-cost headsets that they subsidize through their store. That's exactly what Valve's doing with Steam Deck. It's literally the exact same thing, and it's why you see similar capability handhelds to Steam Deck are often priced higher. So I could see Valve doing the same thing as Steam Deck for your living room. I often call it the Steam Blade, just out of a random name that they could call it, but I don't know what they would call it. And then you wouldn't have to have a PC, but it would basically still just be a PC that is underneath your living room, made by Valve. So that's a super interesting idea there. We're going to close out this show really soon here. If there's any other comments that people want to bring up, please do, as I really want to read out any kind of thoughts that people have here. James O'Loughlin saying Valve needs to do standardized dynamic foveated rendering with eye tracking. Yes, that's a really, really great point. For any of this to even work, we're talking about foveated rendering. Right now, there is like no standardized way to do this in Steam VR, right? There is OpenXR, of course, but like, we don't have like just a really standard way for every Steam VR game to easily implement one-click foveated rendering. And that's mainly because most eye tracking headsets are very low volume. The majority of headsets used on Steam don't have eye tracking, so developers don't bother to implement it. Now, we heard last week from Bigscreen's Darshan that they are working with Valve and NVIDIA to try and get foveated rendering as a post-launch feature in Bigscreen Beyond 2E, the one that has eye tracking. And so you imagine that work is obviously going to be relevant to a Deckard as well. But like, right now, they launch Deckard tomorrow. They don't have this foveated rendering because, if it's being worked on with Valve with Bigscreen, then it's obviously not ready out the door. So that's something they're going to have to even get working here. I do still think it's possible that Deckard has some standalone capability, right? But I think maybe it's more 2D screens. Maybe you have this Linux-based Steam OS, you bring up your browser, and so you have Netflix, and that part's being rendered on the headset so that your PC can focus entirely on Half-Life Alyx. And then you can imagine other capabilities there that are quite similar to what you see in visionOS and Horizon OS, except you have the PC architecture. So you're running the native Linux versions of PC applications on the headset while the PC is doing the full VR game focus. So, you do have ideas of how you can share compute between the two systems. One thing that I think people do overhype, though, is this idea of split rendering, right? Split rendering became this thing that people who aren't really familiar with the technical architecture of VR games and software thought would mean that, like, there's a magic way that your headset standalone can do some of the compute and the PC can do some of the compute, and then you add them together and you get more powerful VR games. Not really. That would require a very different engine architecture to all of Unity and Unreal, right? You would have to run like part of the game logic on the headset. It would almost be like running a multiplayer session on two different versions of the game. What split rendering really means in practice, and actually what Qualcomm meant when they used the phrase themselves, is literally just what we do today with Steam Deck or Steam Link and Virtual Desktop and AirLink. They just meant by that when they said, oh, we support split rendering, they literally just meant that like you do the reprojection of your head on the headset, and you can do some other things like positional reprojection and motion extrapolation, whereas the PC is still actually rendering the game, and like the actual kind of stuff that's within the game engine is all running on the PC. So even then, right, like a mobile chipset is going to be a rounding error for your NVIDIA GPU. So even if you did go through all the effort to come up with this crazy split rendering architecture where some of it's done on the PC and some of it's done on the headset, and it would be a nightmare for developers and would be something that would very few would bother to support. What's the benefit? Like 2%, maybe even like 1% performance. Like it doesn't really do anything, right? Like I just want to be clear, the split rendering thing is not quite what people think it is. Aka Big Worm is pointing out the client could use AI to do some fancy frame rendering and enhancement. Sure, you could do some sort of overlay or something. We're far away from being able to run like full visual filters in real time, but like again, it already does do like reprojection. So you're skewing the image in the direction you're looking. Frame synthesis. So if the PC is too strained, it can go down to half frame rate, and then you extrapolate each frame. That's split rendering, right? But you're not really doing the actual game engine stuff on the headset, and you have massive trade-offs of doing frame extrapolation, the main of which being latency, right? Even input latency, because the game is still only being rendered once. But again, if you were building like a very, very custom application for one specific use case, and you wanted to really optimize for like hand latency, theoretically, yeah, you could probably build a system that renders the controllers and hands locally and does everything else. But like trying to standardize that across game engines, not going to happen. We couldn't even see like, if people wanted to do that, they could have done it for like Stadia and GeForce Now and Xbox Cloud streaming. Like they could do the UI locally and do some of the other stuff locally. They don't even do that. Like you couldn't even convince developers to do that for cloud streaming. Good luck in convincing them to do that just for VR. So I think we can close off the show here now. We wanted to just dig into a lot of these issues here and kind of get really deep technically. Sorry, I'm stalling. I'm reading a lot of the comments. As someone joked, we're not going to get through all these comments, and you're right, there are a lot of thoughts here. But we're really excited to see what Valve does come out with this year. We have high expectations, even though I don't think it's standalone PC VR. It doesn't mean they can't come up with something excellent. The Index, despite the fact that the Index on that resolution discussion was not breakthrough resolution for its time, right? It was pretty much like marginally more effectively than the Rift S and less than the HP Reverb. It still was just a fantastic headset that had, wide field of view lenses, especially on the vertical, really great audio tracking. The comfort was done right, even though it was heavy. They had a good balance. These are the kind of things I'm looking forward to from Valve Deckard. I think like you could, even if it was this POC that we're talking about, like it's just a Quest 3 with eye tracking, even if it was, that's only the core specs. I think Valve could do better on things like the ergonomics, on audio, on comfort, on all of these things where like Meta kind of, ships this thing with a cheap soft strap and a kind of relatively low cost face pad. You could see Valve do a lot of work to like just make this a kind of higher quality product then, and that would still be interesting. So yeah, let's keep a close eye on this. I still think our commenters will all agree that Valve Deckard is the most anticipated headset in this industry. My thoughts here are just let's not mythologize it. It's not going to change the laws of physics. It just is still, all of these companies are playing by the same rules. If any of these companies were able to come out with like a breakthrough new cooling system or a new battery system, they would be using it for a lot more than just headsets, right? They'd be able to revolutionize phones, smartwatches, electric cars, right? If it was a new battery architecture, all of these things. So fortunately, they're playing by the same laws of physics as the rest of consumer electronics. And while there can be some breakthroughs, I do think like Valve is going to be playing by the same rules of engineering as everyone else. Still really, really interested to see what they come out with this year. And thank you everyone for watching our show, for listening to this rant at the end, for getting through. This has been a great discussion today. We've had some really great comments here. I can't even process them all at once. Usually, like, what we do is while Ian's talking, I'm half reading the comments, and while I'm talking, Ian's half reading the comments. But I really kind of understand how difficult it is for people that do both at once here, because this is a challenge. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future. And please go to uploadvr.com for our latest coverage. And there's some great stuff coming from GDC, from Henry Stockdale and Don Hopper, the latter of which is in our comments today. Thanks, everyone.